vampires.
What? No, it can't.
What he doesn't know about vampirism wouldn't fill a flea's codpiece.
Hey, this is Conor McMahon here.
This is Conor Dowling.
And Mark Sheridan.
And today we'll be talking about Hammer Horror. So, Mark, what is Hammer Horror?
Good question.
Because I sure as hell don't know.
No pressure. Okay, so Hammer Horror is, I guess, the affectionate term for a chunk of films made by Hammer Productions in the kind of mid-50s to kind of, I think, early 70s. I could be wrong on that. It was a company that started, I think, in 1934, but didn't really touch horror until later on, and I think we're going to just focus on the horror end of it today.
Okay, that's interesting because like when I hear Hammer, it immediately is
Absolutely,
horror.
yeah.
That's the association.
And where were they based?
They were based in, wasn't it Bray Studios? I think they changed it to Bray.
In the UK?
Studios. Yeah, the UK.
Not the sets out of Dublin.
No, I know, which confused the hell out of me as a kid. You're kind of going, really? But yeah, so like I think what it was it was a response. They were just trying to make successful films, and they made their first film, which was the Quatermass Experiment.
Oh yeah,
okay. And that was a huge hit. And kind of from then they started to license some of the rights from the Universal horror films, so they could actually do their own remakes and reversions. But really, what Hammer I think was famous for was, for the time, they embraced kind of the X rating certificate, which was kind of new at the time, and that's why the first one, the Quatermass Experiment, was spelled X instead of EX for experiment, because they were showing off the fact and it was considered at the time very controversially violent and overtly sexual. Now, by modern day standards, we're talking about just very bright scarlet blood and very well endowed women in tight corsets. So that is kind of the level of what it goes for. But at the time, it was considered pretty scandalous and really quite terrifying.
Though I did read that Christopher Lee, what he said about Hammer was that the horror was never something that would happen in real life. That's he kind of had this thing where he started to, I suppose, stop doing horror movies for a while because he said they were kind of became too close to reality. Whereas the Hammers, I suppose you were talking about the Draculas and the Frankensteins, and the horror was just it was a little bit more fantastical, I suppose. Even if it was shocking, it was still it didn't have that raw edge that the horror started. I mean, I think they also said that's kind of what caused the decline of Hammer, which was when stuff like The Exorcist or even Halloween,
Night of the Living Dead,
movies,
as well as the late 60s, Texas Chainsaw of the beginning of the 70s. Yeah, like that horror came home, and the Hammer, all of a sudden it looked very outdated. Because, of course, not all, but a lot of their films are set in period times. Yeah. And, I think the audience had moved on beyond that at that stage. But that doesn't mean there isn't interesting stuff still to find there. Yeah. I think we're going to try and keep this as positive as possible. I know, unfortunately, Ali Horror wasn't able to be here today, and she is disgusting lover of Hammer horror films.
It was her idea to do this podcast actually on Hammer because she's such a big fan of it. But she's off in Berlin at the moment, so she's working really hard over there. She said she was going to send us a little spiel on Hammer, so hopefully we'll get that before the end of the show.
We're in a basement with no signal.
Yeah,
I don't know if
we'll have time to read it because she has a lot to say about it. But
you can post it on the Facebook page.
But it, isn't it? Because we want to try and keep this as a generally positive thing, but I think it's fair to say that while historically Hammer is incredibly relevant to the horror genre, a lot of the films were made quite cheaper. They were made quick. They weren't, there wasn't all the love and attention put into a lot of those kind of scripts, and as a result, there's many films in that thing where you can love them for certain reasons, but I think it would be slightly overstating it to declare them as like classics.
I would have known Hammer. Like, it was funny with this because I would have heard about Hammer a lot, but it would have been limited to the Dracula films. That's what I would have seen.
When I think of Hammer horror, I see Christopher Lee as Dracula.
Absolutely. I think I was a little bit confused about it because I knew, Hammer, I'd seen the logo a million times. I've seen all the 50 DVD box sets of Hammer, like in X-Division and stuff, but when we were first talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon and stuff, and you guys are like, no, that's Universal Monsters. Like, so I was like, all right, okay, I totally didn't know the amount of films that they made. Like, they didn't just necessarily make horror; they made a lot of suspense, and it wasn't always necessarily creature films. They made like more kind of almost sci-fi, psychological kind of stuff as well in that horror banner.
And because the first one I watched was because, again, I would have seen the Dracula ones, which were great actually to rewatch, and I think are some of the best Hammers.
Quiz question, Connor: how many Dracula films did they make?
Oh, off the top of my head, I'd say 5, but I don't really know.
9.
Wow. Okay.
How many can you name? I have them all.
Scars of Dracula, Blood of Dracula.
Dracula
The Horror
AD.
of Dracula. Some of them had different names. Like Horror of Dracula, I think was the American title for.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
I
few of
came
these
across
were
some of that
retold,
as
which
well.
can be a bit trickier.
Scars
Even
of
The Devil
Dracula,
Rides Out, what was that called as well? That was changed to something else because The Devil's Bride or something, because they were afraid Devil's Ride Out sounded like a Western. And they're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
The Devil at the beginning might have changed it. But like the Dracula ones, like you got Dracula, Brides of Dracula, Dracula, Prince of Darkness, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. Good title. Taste the Blood of Dracula, Scars of Dracula, Satanic Rites of Dracula, and Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. That's quite a lot of vampire films to turn out, you know.
What about Dracula AD?
Oh, that's 1972 AD. That's a good point,
Because I
actually.
watched that.
That was one I really wanted to check
Yeah,
out again.
yeah.
I saw that years ago, and I actually had a bit of fun with that
Yeah,
one. But
yeah, that's
what's it like?
interesting.
Does it stand up? Or?
Yeah, like I mean, to be honest, that was the first one that I watched. It's something about the name just kind of attracted me to it. I was like, yeah, I want to check that out. I think maybe I had seen it on IMDb somewhere, a watch list at some stage, you know. And I was like, yeah, I'll give that a go. And it really felt like I was kind of coming to the party late, you know, because it's in the chronology of those vampire films.
To try and keep it fresh, they basically brought Dracula forward into the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have Christopher Lee playing Dracula, and they have Peter Cushing playing Van Helsing.
A very old Van Helsing, I believe.
And it starts with this, like literally, the film starts in the middle of this epic horse and carriage fight between Dracula and Van Helsing, where they're like literally the horses are running along the path and they're like strangling each other, they're going off the road, and basically they kill each other, and then it does this really cool transition where the camera like pans up to the sky. So this is in old times, right? So then the camera pans up, tilts up to the sky, and we see an airplane flying in the sky. So it's in the 70s.
How do they explain the time travel?
It just cuts forward like 80 years into the present day.
It's like 2001.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really low key.
It's like one of
version
those great edits in cinema.
Absolutely. Oh, and I'm a sucker for those type of transitions.
How are you going to justify in the script? It's just going to happen.
But it's so then, you know, the film is about the ancestors of Van Helsing and this disciple of Dracula, whose name is Johnny Alucard, which, as we all know,
Is this Dracula backwards?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw this film. Yeah.
So he collected, or one of his ancestors collected some of the dust of Dracula when he died back in the day, and he brings him back to life, and then Dracula, played by Christopher Lee, goes on a killing spree and tries to kill Van Helsing's granddaughter.
All right.
So because she's like the last, like, you know, or no, she's not even the last, because there's a modern day Van Helsing who's like he's like some sort of scientist, and he gets roped into it as well, and then he has to like kind of reassume the job of Dracula hunter, even though it's just in his blood, you know, it's not something he's ever done before.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. And that kind of sucked me into it a bit. It sort of made me see like there's a bit of a universe here, you know, like the way nowadays you have your Marvel Cinematic Universe. You kind of had your Hammer universe where you have Christopher Lee as Dracula, Peter Cushing as Van
It is
Helsing.
one of the nice things about Hammer, where you do see the recurring actors
Yeah,
appear in
yeah.
different roles.
I really like that.
It can be nice or sad, depending. I don't know, like, you know, because like there's a couple of films here we hear, and it was directed by, was it Terence Fisher, and it was starring Peter Cushing and also Christopher Lee, and that could be about 6 of them.
Music by James Bernard.
But yeah.
So you know what I mean? I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, it made me want to watch more Hammer films. There's a real kind of nostalgic feel to it, you know, and I get a lot of what Ali is talking about. Ali has a real kind of nostalgic buzz for these Hammer horror films. And while I wouldn't put it up there in, you know, my top 20 or top 100 horror films.
Yeah.
But, you know, I could see myself sitting at home and just binge watching like 5
Yeah,
of
they
them in a
did
row,
start to grow on me. Like, you know, the first few
Yeah.
I watched, I wasn't that sure about them. But then I started to see, I suppose as well, I saw how they might have influenced other horror films. Like,
Yeah.
I started to see scenes that were possibly done better in other films. But, you know, when you see the origin of it, and you kind
Absolutely,
of go,
yeah.
oh, that's really interesting.
Another thing I thought was kind of consistent from that Dracula one and the other ones is we were saying about how you know, things might have been pretty tame and the production values weren't really high, but they stuck to the mythology of the vampires, and as a result, got some really cool effects, you know, by just really simple things like throwing holy water on someone and having a load of smoke coming off them. And, you know, there was a thing where he was shining the sunlight onto somebody, and then they like shone the sunlight into the lens of the camera, and you kind of get dazzled yourself a little bit. Like just things like that I thought were really nicely done, you know, because obviously they were probably working with smaller budgets than other horror films.
What I liked as well, one of the things, say the Frankenstein and the Dracula, specifically the what is it, Curse of Frankenstein,
the first one,
and I read a bit because what's interesting about watching that and the Dracula thing, you think you're watching what you're familiar with about the story, but it completely twists it. Now, one of the reasons I know for the Frankenstein one was because even though, like you say, maybe Universal gave them the rights or they just went back to the book, but they'd written the script, but then they were told by Universal, if anything that was in the Universal film was in their film, they were going to get sued. Okay. So they had to rewrite the story. Right. And I don't know if that happened for the Dracula one, but...
For Dracula, actually, they had shot the film before they permissioned to make it. They only signed the deal. It was something like, I think, an 80-page document with Universal, but it took so long to negotiate that they had actually shot the film and they were still hoping it would come together. So that's how tight it was, Oh,
man. But, I mean, I actually think that Dracula is a brilliant film, that first one, because not only... I love the speed of the storytelling. It's literally first shot, the carriage arriving.
You're there.
Second shot, he's at the castle. Third shot, he's inside the castle. And also, it really does twist what you know. Like Harker arrives at the castle, and you're familiar with the story. But actually, he already knows Dracula is there, and he has the stakes with him. But then he gets bitten, and then it's sort of like everything you think you're gonna watch. It's a kind of twist, which I thought was great.
That was what I thought was great about the Dracula AD, was literally that it started with an absolute bang. Like, you know, I was just okay, here we go, let's see what this is like, and then I was just instantly engaged in this like horse and carriage, like,
and they all end immediately at the end. Like the credits just roll.
That is something I like. It's like evil is defeated. Go home.
Literally, the credits roll. Like, I mean, the Dracula AD as well. Like, you know, Van Helsing, surprise, surprise, saves the day, and you know, he takes his granddaughter, and then it just ends. No, like, no epilogue or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I do. And so, like, okay, before we move on from Dracula ones, then, like, Christopher Lee, like, obviously, Dracula is the role that he is most known for. I think, you know, I think he. It's not one actually. The Devil Rides Out is his favorite Hammer film.
His favorite,
and I think his favorite Hammer, and I think his famous horror film was actually The Wicker Man. But like for iconic kind of status, because I do think to this day, as much as people presume it's Bela Lugosi, they imagine when they imagine Dracula. Yeah, Christopher Lee. It kind of is that image, isn't it, with the cape and everything like that? Like, totally. Is that the best Dracula for you? Like the brooding kind of sort of sexual undertones.
God, I mean, Dracula is a hard one because there's so many of those Dracula films. I mean, I think we talked before about the Frank Angela.
Yes, that's one of my personal
that would be one.
The Jack Palance one, actually, if you've seen, is really
I haven't seen the Jack Palance.
Whenever I think of Dracula, Leslie Nielsen just pops into my head.
Oh, Dead and Loving It, is it?
But like that's a good question, you know, because I suppose I didn't really grow up on any of those those horror films. So like, but there is definitely a place in my head for that Christopher Lee one, you know, who does really kind of like, he just seems really at home in that costume, in that role. Like even in the Dracula one that I watched, like, you know, clearly they had at the time they had been making those films for maybe 20 or 30 years,
absolutely.
You know, and it was like it was probably a sense of here we go again, but it was also like, you know, a return to form, you know, that's kind of what it felt like watching, you know. And I'd say if you were a fan watching that at the time, you'd be like, oh yes, it's Christopher Lee's doing Dracula again, you know.
I think he probably tried more than maybe some of the writers did to actually try and keep some level of quality control. I know in Prince of Darkness that he doesn't utter a single line in the film, because apparently he said that the dialogue was so bad he refused to speak any of it, and he just told them he'd do the whole film silent. I know that the director disputes that, but he maintained it till his death.
There was another funny thing I heard where with the Curse of Frankenstein, that Christopher Lee came running into Peter Cushing with the script, and he goes, I can't believe it, I've got no lines in this movie. And Peter Cushing says, you're lucky, I've read the script.
I'm actually, because that's a good segue then into the Curse of Frankenstein. Like, because you're right, like, I guess Hammer they do twist the story, so they are playing with convention. So it's not just a pure straight up retelling. I don't know that I prefer their take on Frankenstein, but what I thought was interesting was the monster in these films felt more human. Like there's kind of the Universal one for me is still the most iconic. He's just the very stoicness of Karloff's kind of stillness. But this one felt like a real human body, like Christopher Lee, because he's kind of floppy and disorientated and it's kind of disturbing, and it just feels like someone not in control of their senses.
Yeah, I found him quite scary, that Frankenstein, actually.
Yeah.
Or kind of just, you felt sort of sorry for him. And,
Yeah, it was.
you know.
Yeah, it actually did. Because I don't think the film is particularly... But see, because Frankenstein's not a massively scary story. It's more a disturbing story than a scary story.
Yeah,
but his scenes are quite... they're traumatizing in their own weird way.
As brilliant a story as Frankenstein is, it's... You know, not many people... It's been done a lot, but not many people have really nailed it.
I still don't think... It's weird. I don't think so. But then the book doesn't... Like, I find it a little long as well.
Right.
It's a
Yeah, what is it about the Frankenstein movie that's just like... It feels like there's a really good story there, but like
his
probably...
man playing God
like probably
is the
one of
interesting thing.
my favorite like adaptations of it, if you will. It's fairly like... It's not even an adaptation, but that deals with that kind of thing is like Reanimator. You know, Reanimator?
Yeah, I know Reanimator.
I know that's H.P. Lovecraft. It's not like, you know, Mary Shelley Frankenstein, but it's that kind of like reanimating.
Oh, no, but he was. Like, he deliberately...
like... But I think that's probably one of my favorite.
Or
like,
Frankenhooker.
Frankenhooker,
No,
brilliant.
let's not.
That was on the
Jesus.
IFI Hearthon recently, wasn't it?
A couple of years
I-
ago,
because I
along
got
with Bad
that-
Biology, was it?
I honestly think.
I love Bad Biology.
It's like a 7-foot penis breaking through a skirting board. Oh, come on.
I think Frankenhooker was one of the first ever, like, you know, crazy horror films that I just found in a DVD shop, and I was like, I'm gonna buy this. I have no idea what it is. You know, it was probably one of the first one of those that I had in my collection. But that has one of my favorite lines in a film ever. He's watching the news, and it's like all the prostitutes are being killed by the crack in the streets, and he's like, oh, that crack is killing these prostitutes at an alarming rate, but this super crack will kill them even faster. And he makes this crack that makes them explode. Anyway, off topic slide.
back on. So okay, so Frankenstein films. Other Conor Dowling. How many Frankenstein films were there in the Hammer trope?
13.
No, they went a little lower on them. 7.
Okay, but when I was looking through the list, I was blown away by the names of some of them.
titles
It just
are
made me really
incredible.
want to watch them.
Yeah, see, this is the thing with all of them. Like, you kind of go, like, I'm not going to watch all of them. Then you hear them, you're kind of like, huh. It's like the Silent Night, Deadly Night things all over again. So we've got Curse of Frankenstein, The Revenge of Frankenstein, The Evil of Frankenstein, Frankenstein Created Woman, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, Horror of Frankenstein, and Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. That one sounds like a classic.
Yes, that was the one I think I saw. I was like, oh, even though that's the last one, I want to watch that. Like, you know,
But that's what the guy, like when they were, I watched a documentary about Hammer, and the guy, even before they made the film, what he'd do is he'd just make a poster and a title, and he'd go around to distributors and he'd go, would you buy this film?
Did they do the pre-sales thing basically
Yeah,
as well?
yeah, literally, yeah. And then
Wow.
they'd go, they didn't even want to know what the film was about or whatever. It was just, you know, that was the business behind it, kind of. But it was just literally
that's
sold
it.
on
Would
the
it
poster
sell?
and
Would
the
it sell
title.
movie tickets? Like,
Yeah.
What was the name of that Hammer documentary?
On the spot, tick-tock,
Oh
tick-tock.
god, I can't remember. It's on YouTube.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out. I didn't know about that, but yeah, it seems like it would be.
I'm surprised. Like, it feels like there's a really good. Actually, I was talking to Ali when we were walking out of here after the last podcast. There's either a really good like fictional retelling or a documentary to be had, like a proper larger budget thing on the Hammer thing. I'd say. I'd love, you know, and you would probably have to do it as a more fictional film because there isn't archive footage like we have for more recent stuff. But like, it would be quite wonderful seeing the behind the sets because these things were done on a whim and like. I was talking earlier on to Conor Dowling about like in the mid 60s they were to try and manage with their reduced funding. They started shooting films back to back with the same sets, the same costumes, but different stories, and they were just screened as different double bills, like to try and cover that up. But like, there's got to be some interesting kind of stories about the crossovers between that and people not even knowing which film they're on at the moment.
Yeah, because there's the one where Dracula gets killed in the ice at the end.
I kind of like that one.
Yeah, but they used that for the.
I think that's Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, but the set of that was used in. It was one of the ones you were watching. I can't remember one of the other films.
Was it Dead Rides Out?
No,
or
definitely not that.
Snowman? Abominable Snowman?
No, because it was a
Which I
castle
actually
one.
didn't get a chance to watch. Was it Rasputin the Mad Monk?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that one? I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen Rasputin the Mad Monk, but I know they used the Rasputin
I didn't
sets
get,
for the.
The Rasputin the Mad Monk was actually the first one I sat down to watch of these, and it didn't start off well for me. I was kind of like, shit, is this what I'm in for, you know, for the next week watching all these movies. You know, it's Rasputin. as we know him.
Was
from
he a mad
history.
monk?
He was a mad lad. He was a mad lad. Like, I mean, the first 10 minutes of the film, he like cures someone of some disease and then gets into a fight with a bunch of guys, and then and he saves a woman and then tries to have his way with the woman, and that's all like in the first like 5 minutes. It's crazy. I didn't make it through it though. It was too too hokey and just kind of it really kind of I was worried it would set the tone for the rest of my Hammer viewings, but then when I saw Dracula AD, I was like, oh no, this is actually going to be really good. You know, just gotta stick with ones that I know.
Yeah.
What other ones? There's that funny thing as well. Just what was the other one I watched? Reptile or Plague of Zombies.
Plague of Zombies is one I was trying to find and I couldn't track down. Actually, that's considered one of their better ones.
Yeah,
is that the one you sent us the clip of the zombie extra fighting and then the guy beating him? That was so
Connor has a little thing about extras in Hammer horror films. Would you like to talk about it?
Well, every so often they just find a funny video off the screen.
Our WhatsApp group is just random videos of, hey, look at this extra not knowing what he's doing.
Yeah, we might.
That
we
was
might
from
share
Quatermass and the Pit.
Oh,
which
right.
is
the
actually,
one where the extra was just looking into
talk
space.
about Plague of Zombies and then we'll get on to the Quatermass ones because I really like the Quatermass trilogy.
Plague of Zombies, yeah. I mean, the thing I was going to
What's
bring
the basic
up
story actually
on Plague of Zombies. It's basically it follows a doctor and his daughter that go on a visit to a small town after they get a distress letter from one of the girl's childhood friends, and basically people in the town are disappearing. I don't really know, but it's what's interesting about it, I suppose, is it's not zombies before Night of the Living Dead zombies.
Yes.
Right,
You know,
okay,
that sort of
so many people have this assumption that zombies were always like that, and they weren't.
Yeah.
They were not flesh-eating ghouls until
it's
Romero
much
brought
more
that in.
like voodoo.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes,
that
yes.
kind of
White
thing.
zombie type.
Yeah. I mean, though, this was one of the better ones, I thought, because there's a scene, and again, it had some good sort of shocking images, I suppose. Like, there's a scene where they arrive into town at the start, and there's a funeral procession through the town, and there's basically this group of fox hunting lads come through the funeral, and the coffin falls over a bridge into the water, and the lid falls open, and you see the body hanging out of it. But it was, you know what I mean? It was. There's
something wonderful, you know, because like anytime that's done in a horror film, that really creeps me out. The whole just seeing an actual like a dead body in a coffin, not a reanimated one. I remember like in Pet Sematary when Gage's coffin gets knocked over and it flips open for a second, and you just see the child's hand.
Yes.
But I don't know what it is, but seeing that lifeless figure,
What was that Sam Raimi one a couple of years ago?
Drag Me to Hell? Or?
Drag Me to Hell, when the gypsy falls out of the thing and the body falls on top of her, and then the embalming fluid comes out of her mouth into her mouth.
That is a disgusting film.
It's so funny though.
So in Plague of the Zombies, like when you're talking about pre-Romero zombies, if they're attacking people, what is it, they strangle people? How?
Yeah. Basically, it's more kind of strangling.
Kind of a mummy, like sort of like.
Basically, it's voodoo. Like there's, you know, somebody has
Someone's controlling them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Like the people will. There's a guy, and he's using a particular method, like where he'll come over to their house and he asks for a glass of water, and they'll go over, and I think he'll drop the glass, and when they go to pick it up, he'll somehow get them to cut their finger, and once he's got a bit of their blood, he takes it back, and he has little dolls off them or whatever, and once he can get their blood on it, then they'll die and then come back as a zombie.
Oh, right, okay.
There is quite a funny scene later on because he has all these little sort of clay dolls of the people, but in a fight it gets knocked into the fire, and all the zombies
all burst into flames?
Somewhere else start like smoke coming out of them, and then they all go on fire.
That's cool. I like that. And are there any stars in that? Are there any of the Hammer classic stars in it or anything?
None of not Peter Cushing.
Not Peter Cushing or
Christopher Lee.
We're not educated enough to know who the other people are.
Yeah. There is
that was my question.
There's a thing in the film as well, which I noticed throughout the horror film. Some of the other Hammers as well, is this sort of, you know, they have to the woman is always going off to do the cooking for the lads, and they can only really talk about what's going on when the woman goes away.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was just a little bit of like, you know, you go off and make the tea there now, and we'll talk about the serious matters.
The films definitely suffer from casual racism and sexism, but then it's a little hard to lambast the films for that, simply because it was. As much a time and place.
Time.
Yeah, but you know, like it's not, because like there are films that like were still doing that well beyond when those things moved on. But you know, I think like it's weird for us to watch it now, but I don't think anyone at the time would have felt they were particularly playing to terrible stereotypes.
I know what you mean.
The other thing, it was in this film as well, and I'm just kind of talking. Do you know when you start seeing a load of the Hammers very quickly, you start to notice the recurring themes. But another one, it's like that classic silent film thing where the last act is usually someone in peril, and they have to race to save them. I just noticed that in like even with The Devil Rides Out, and it seemed to be what one of the factors that somebody would be trapped and in peril at the end, and the main characters would be on.
There was definitely a sort of format, you know.
Yeah,
what I mean? They were consistent.
This works.
All of them are like an hour and a half long. That's one of the things that's great.
Which
about
is
them,
great.
is that you can watch a lot of them, and it kind of doesn't take up your whole day, and they don't really drag. But things, the way if you read like a book on like screenwriting, they're like something has to happen on page 25, and your third act is like there's some sort of finale and all. It kind of hits all those beats like really well. Like just at the moment where you're kind of like, I've got an idea of what this film is about. Then the mysterious thing happens. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Now we're into the second act. What's going to happen here? Like they're pretty consistent. I thought. That sort of stuff.
They are, and of course, like those formulas do work. I guess that's why they lean to them. Like we definitely on another day we need to do a podcast with a chat about those kind of rules and structures, because like it's guaranteed if you stick with those structures, your story will rattle along. I think even nowadays some people that were still very trapped into believing that literally if by page 18 this doesn't happen, and I know all the great script writing books they'll tell you, but look at all these great scripts where it did happen by page 18 and you're like, I get that. But also it just seems really to break down an art form and say that unless it happens on this page your film isn't going to be good seems.
Well, I think when you're in a kind of a studio situation and you probably have like some sort of quota like Hammer, maybe they had to make
they wrote
like,
them in a couple of weeks.
They probably had to make so many films like a month or whatever that they were like, it has to follow these couple of things. We know this works.
Absolutely.
We know the audience will scream at the 25-minute mark if you do this. So we just do it because it's a business, it's a conveyor belt. You have to kind of keep things moving.
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of that writing comes from.
It's a funny one. I'd love to know because I don't know enough about because Hammer to me sort of feels like a lot of the directors are just directors for hire. While in some of the Corman ones and everything, like actually it was, say with Scorsese on Boxcar Bertha or Coppola on Dimension 13, there was more an element of you have to deliver these certain things for me. But apart from that, like fucking go off and play, which is kind of a nice thing. I don't quite get that sense from Hammer horror films. You don't sort of feel voices, bar one or two. When we talk about The Nanny, I think you definitely do actually, but generally they seem to have it's almost like TV, like when each episode of Coronation Street is the same. Each Hammer film has very much the same look, very much the same framing.
Totally,
Same type of acting as well.
Absolutely,
it's totally the same style of acting. And at times, that can be something that can kind of put me off even watching one of those movies that I'm like, they're like, oh, well, dear, I don't know what. And you're just like, you just feel like, how is this going to be different?
And I also think as well, just with the camera work, even though I love the look of those films and they definitely have their own look, you're never going to find interesting shots except something later like The Nanny, which I did think was really
nice
well
stuff
shot.
going on in there,
but in the other ones it's very much wide shot,
it's functional I guess it's fair to say. There's nothing so it doesn't creative.
That's why with the Quatermass thing, it has a lot of the ideas that you might see in stuff like Close Encounters or The Thing or
The Thing
Body
is what
Snatchers.
struck, like especially Quatermass too. Like actually, let's talk about it because there is ideas wise, and I think Conor, you're right as well when you're saying about even other films in the Hammer things, because I guess like for me and I think most of us here, like when we were growing up, the directors were the Carpenters, Romeros, Cronenbergs, and so their films have influenced ours a huge amount, but the films they were watching were the Hammer horror films. So there's no doubt that there is a second degree of separation kind of thing with it, because the Quatermass one, so starting off the first one, I believe it was a BBC serial. I think, was it a radio? I'm not sure if there was a film version as well,
I don't know.
It was like a 3-hour long piece if you put it all together, and so they made their shortened kind of version of all three of them together. The first two in the first couple of years, and then the third one actually about 12 years later, I think. But do you have you seen them all?
No, I've just seen the Quatermass and the Pit.
I've only seen the first one and the third one. So
the Pit,
to be honest, I saw Quatermass and the Pit when like a bunch of years ago. I bought it on DVD and laser and didn't know it was part of a trilogy until
and you don't really need to either, actually, in fairness to them. I kind of like that each story is actually, it's what I wish more modern kind of franchises had, where they are like Quatermass carries through them all, but the stories are their own stand-off ones, and they don't reference the other ones. Even sometimes slightly bizarrely, because like in the pit when he comes across alien technology, you thought he'd mentioned that twice. I've come up against other alien invasions.
Absolutely. And like,
He
yeah,
seems
it's
that
like
surprised
I
each
shouldn't be surprised, but for some reason I am. But actually, it's funny that you mentioned about the influences of the Hammer films, because I think Quatermass Experiment, that was one of the first ones.
It was
wasn't
their first one, yeah, absolutely.
But that was like what, 1958 or something?
It
or
was
55?
Hold on, I have it here. 1955.
Yeah, but only 5 years later, Rod Serling in America started making the Twilight Zone, and I've watched nearly every episode of the original Twilight Zone.
It does feel very in that kind of world.
And there's one particular episode, I think it's called like 50 Fathom Grave or something like that, and it's this submarine that's like trapped like under. There's been some sort of accident. There's people above ground, and they're like trying to set up this rescue mission, and they have that thing with the tapping. Like they think they're not alive, and then they hear the tapping quite like Quatermass. So I was watching it, and there were some things in it that quite reminds me of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some direct influences there.
I'd say
maybe they were both influenced by something else, like by the same.
Well, see, again, the BBC serial was around years and years before that, so I think it was still probably only known in England. Like I can't imagine it traveled that far, but yeah, you'd wonder how far some people might have heard of it. But like I think, because I can't quite remember the first one as well, but like it's a ship that went up into space. It comes crash landing down. And there's only one survivor. Yeah. And then they begin to become suspicious that maybe why is he the only one alive? They're going back over old video footage. Of
They basically run this experiment to find out what was happening on the ship by like looking through like this, essentially like the security footage. And I think there's like missing footage.
There exactly, so early found footage, folks. Hammer started it
or lost footage.
But like and I think so. There is then that question of, which a lot of films have done since then, like this person who's come back, they're kind of different. Is that really them? Have they just been changed, or is there an alien kind of thing in it?
A lot of that is influenced by like the war as well. There was a lot of kind of exploitation films as well, people coming back from the war and being different. Now when it's a horror film, usually when they come back from the war and they're different, they're a zombie or a cannibal. But it's all
no, but there was also that fear of people, whether they were spies or stuff as well. It's whether you'd been like
or shell shocked, or it was like it was a comment on what was happening to people.
Was, and again eventually evolves into a giant blob creature in is it Westminster Cathedral or somewhere? I think they just blow it to hell, don't they? Or they go to, I can't quite remember how it ends.
Which one?
The end of the first one.
Oh, I didn't.
In the third one is the third one, because I saw that
the subway station,
and is there loads of little creatures?
Yeah, so like, go through, because the second one's the less watched one actually, and probably isn't the least good of them, but it's actually still kind of curious to watch, because it reminded me most of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Because like literally he comes across, it's an army base where little meteors, I think, have been falling from the sky, and these little kind of black things are attaching to people somewhere on their face or their neck or something, and it's basically turning them into kind of like body snatcher type. They're drones. They're just doing what they're told, and your man Quatermass discovers that the whole base has been taken over that, and they're actually using their kind of big reactor place to actually make a habitat for these aliens to grow inside, and he's got to stop it. But it's well worth watching, and it has those creepy moments of those like body snatcher scenes going through the city where you just have those brain dead people just following you, you know what I mean, and luring you in, and they're everyone who believes you're telling the truth and the conspiracy is real, then suddenly turns back up, and now they're on message and they don't believe, so that kind of creeping thing. And again, I suppose that's that whole thing of like someone else's ideology coming in and actually just changing these people. We definitely would have at the time the fear of communism and everything like that. So like no doubt that these things kind of play into it. But then you get to 3, which is a much bigger film, and because it's the first one in color as well. 3 for me is kind of fascinating, because I hadn't seen it until last year. The IFI showed it on the big screen here, and it looked incredible. But like I would argue that there's so many interesting and great ideas in Quatermass in the Pit. They don't all work,
agree.
but there's so much stuff in there. That you're
I was watching it going, oh my god! Like and even the whole backstory I thought was brilliant about the whole devil, the origin.
You watched it recently for this, did you?
Yeah, just last week.
Refresh my memory on it, because it's been so long since I've seen it.
Well, it basically starts with it's like a subway station, and they uncover these skulls, which they think are kind of a primitive man.
The missing link type.
Yeah, and then they sort of, as they're digging, there's this sort of metal. They come across this metal, which they initially think is a bomb, and so they're calling in the military and whatever. Right. And as they uncover it, looks more like a spaceship, I suppose. And like I suppose there's a couple of theories. I can't remember kind of the middle bit of the plot, but the basic idea is that in the past, a couple of million years ago, I think it's a million years ago.
Yeah, it's quite a while.
The aliens might have come down. Who were these? I mean, the special effects are pretty terrible of these creatures, but the
Kinda
idea
wasps.
is good. Yeah,
I
like
remember the
insects.
waspy things.
But they're kind of these slightly horned creatures. And the idea is that would have created our human civilization,
Right, okay.
basically.
Yeah.
And
It's Prometheus.
yeah, exactly. And so that's where even our idea of the devil comes from. There's a bit where they're reading a script,
okay.
which really reminded me of a scene from Indiana Jones. Like, there's a couple of Spielberg moments where I was going, "Oh, he's got to watch this." But even when they find that spaceship first, there's really nice moments, like where they go to listen to it with a sort of a magnetic device, but it won't stick to the metal. And they're like, "What is this?" And then the guy kind of they're trying to drill it, but they can't. And this guy comes in and he's
with
like,
his super drill?
with this super drill, and he's like building it up like, I've drilled through whatever, and he's just like, it just slips off it. And
They sell that stuff because again, like the effects aren't brilliant there, but say even with the magnet bit and the drill, it's the kind of the dumbfoundedness of the people doing it really makes you believe. It's kind of the magic of it, and it's quite simple stuff, but it just their complete shock at how is this even possible. It gives you that wonderful sense of wonder, which again we're kind of missing nowadays with our more blunt force, just spectacular type thing. Because even when they open it and they climb inside and everything, I think there's kind of an echoing type thing or something. Like, it's just kind of creepy because when they get in, they find it's empty, first of all. And that's really confusing. And then it's behind that they find the waspy
And then
things.
it actually gave me a little bit of goosebumps moments where they go, Hobbs Station, and then they're like, Hobbs, that's an old name for the devil.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh, it's probably nothing.
Everyone pauses and kind of, it's like one of those moments of,
yeah.
But and like, you know, this film, because again, Quatermass is much older, kind of grizzled in this one, like, and I quite like that in it. But like, it builds to a pretty apocalyptic
the end sequence
finale.
Is great.
Yeah, and again, because this is, for me, first time seeing it on the cinema screen, you're just kind of going, I did not, because the Hammer films, they're not famous for having stuff, because like London's collapsing left, right, and centre. You have people going nuts. You know, I've some memory of people hanging out in a pub as well, having their last.
They do. It reminded me of Shaun of the Dead.
Yes,
it's like the world is collapsing. It's like,
exactly
let's pop into the pub.
Yeah.
But like, again, it's coming back to all these ideas because your man Quatermass it starts to control the people with their minds. It's like it's full of ideas, like, you know, and then you have all these like Body Snatchers, these spooky scenes of crowds of people just standing watching.
Yes.
And they do really nice stuff with effects. Did you know they're probably using wires or whatever, but kind of creating a zero gravity type effect where everything starts kind of going up and down and people are being flung around the place. And there's a guy he's on, you know, a level platform, but he's tumbling backwards. And it just had that idea that it's zero G, but it was probably just some guy going head over heels, like just doing it.
But yeah, isn't it? Because like there's, and I don't know whether it's necessarily brilliant storytelling, because I'm not sure that the climax like is quite justified by the earlier on part of it, but I think it's kind of disturbing because it just feels like the whole film goes off the rails, as if in the same way in the film story, the way that like madness is kind of reigning, the film itself just seems to you just can't predict where it's going. And like even that, because it's like all Hammer films, 2 minutes before the end, this film is far from finished. Do you know what I mean? And then it just suddenly happens, and they kind of sit down in a rock, and they're kind of going, "Well, there you have it, folks." And then credits, you know.
But it was cool.
It's
like,
quite sad though as well.
Yeah, but I thought the effect was really nice because there had been some dodgy effects earlier, but then the sort of
giant
image
creature
of the devil
and the
comes
kind
up.
of the clouds or the smoke or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, you see him in the smoke, and then they're like,
how do they defeat it again?
Basically, they know that kind of iron or metal is what defeated, and so the guy climbs up into a crane. Now I'm not sure what his plan is, because he kind of climbs up into the crane, and then the ground rocks, and so the crane swings across, and it's like he didn't do anything. I thought he was going to.
That's the bit that got me, because you're kind of going like, wait a minute. Unless you're kind of going, well, God saved us all, as the Devil's rides out. Unfortunately, leans on in the end.
Well, yeah, like I mean, speaking of the Devil Rides Out, like I mean, I only watched that today.
For the first time?
Yeah.
I have one last thing to say about Quatermass just before I don't know if you noticed this, but the last shot of it really reminded me of the end of The Thing.
Yes.
With the two people just standing there in silence and the credits roll.
Yeah. It's a beautiful kind of thing, because there's no kind of like, it's okay, they've survived, but there's no kind of like, you know, London is decimated and we don't know what it kind of lies in. Yeah, so there's no easy out on this. Yeah, definitely 100% the thing.
Because it just holds the shot on the two characters.
They're on the other side of the credits, isn't it? The credits rolls up between them.
And it's just this like minute of silence between them. And it just reminded me of that kind of thing.
Like, I mean, like Quatermass in the Pit, it's really highly regarded, like among, you know, it's on all the lists, like, you know, like, I mean, I think that's why I picked it up at the time when I got it, like on DVD and laser a couple of years ago. So I wouldn't be surprised, like,
Yeah,
John
if you
Carpenter.
haven't seen it and you're interested in kind of horror films or science fiction, I think do yourself a favor. You are really going to enjoy it. There's a whole lot of interesting stuff in there. I think definitely worth watching.
Absolutely.
So,
But
Conor
yeah,
Diamond, do you want to hit into the Devil
Devil
Rides Out?
Rides Out, yeah.
Don't
like,
look
I
at
mean,
the eyes, Rex. The eyes.
I'd heard about this film before, actually. I think I remember my mother telling me about it years ago and saying, you know, oh my God, it's like the most, like, it's the scariest film ever. You know, it's, don't watch it. The devil is actually in it. You know, all that kind of like superstition stuff. Because I think people have a bit of a, you know, you can have your Dracula movie, you can have your zombie movie or whatever, but there's not that many devil movies.
No, and
know?
this is a real good one.
But I think people, because it's like bet into people from such a young age, you know, maybe in much more stricter Christian circles, it's a lot more fire and brimstone than it might have been what we might have grown up with. But so if there's a film about like the devil, like whether it's Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist, it's like there's a little bit of an aura around that film of like, don't watch it or the devil will get you. You know, whereas vampires, they're kind of more fantasy for some people, you know. So I think that's kind of why I would have been warned off it when I was younger, you know.
But it was, even at the time they were making it, it took 4 or 5 years for them to be able to get it greenlit because the fear of occultism and Satanism at the time was really kicking off. So actually, even then, like it was a difficult film to get made.
Exactly, yeah. But it's one of the things I was really surprised about when I stuck it on was that it was written by Richard Matheson. I even texted you guys going, "Oh my God, Richard Matheson!" Because I'm such a huge fan of his. But just when you said there a second ago about like the kind of the God involvement at the end, like, that doesn't surprise me with Richard Matheson, you know, because he's very spiritual guy, like, you know, in his books, like, I mean, even like if you ever read What Dreams May Come, it was turned into a film with Robin Williams, like, it's all about the afterlife.
I really like that film. I know.
And the book is fantastic. Okay. The book is really, really good. But he'd be very religious guy, like, you know, and I think you'll actually find that with a lot of like Stephen King and stuff like that. They'd be really like, they kind of say like, you know, in order to write about that stuff, you have to believe in it.
That's why I think Irish people are natural for making horror films. I think because, like, you know, I don't really believe a word of it, and yet just because you're raised on it from such a young age, it's so ingrained in you, this concept of like pure evil and everything like that, that it does. And the same way The Exorcist and like things, and I think those films work for people who are not Christians, but particularly for, like, it's hard not to be a little uneasy with it. Yeah, you know,
absolutely, especially when it's done so well. Yeah, because you can have a million B movies about, you know, devil possession or whatever, like, and you can just kind of ignore it. But when it's like The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby, for example, that they're done in such a real world kind of context,
absolutely,
you know, that they really hit home, and that's when they make people go, shit, maybe this actually is real.
Yeah, because like this is one of the more contemporary Hammer ones now. I think it's set in the 1920s or 30s, so it's not like it's modern day, but not set in ye olde times. Yeah, Conor, do you want to give us a basic story on it?
You watched it today, right?
I watched it today.
Is that an unfair bit of pressure? Sorry. Yeah. On to you, Conor McMahon.
What? So it's basically about all these rich English people.
So Christopher Lee and his friend Rex.
Yeah.
Turn up. They're going to see their friend Simon.
Yeah, and basically they find out that their friend is he's part of the astronomical society.
They stumble into
his room, and the floor is covered in this like mad like pentagram. It's kind of a pentagram, but it's a big, you know, occult symbol anyway. And then he's like, what's this all about? Oh, it's just part of the design. And then he hears a noise and he goes into the closet, and there's baskets with hens in them.
A black and white hen.
You know, and he knows immediately that he's like sacrificing them.
I love Christopher Lee, like, he's an expert in it, which kind of is a great way of being able to get your story moving quicker, because he just sees everything and is like, no, this is clear evidence of a sacrifice.
Absolutely.
But this is like 5 minutes in, and they're in the guy's house, and they're kind of kidnapping him, and they're on the road. I mean, it was one of the two things I loved about this film were, how quick, just the pace of it, but also it was nice. It felt like you were out of the studio for a while. Like they were on the, and even though some of the green screen car stuff does take away from it a little bit.
Works though, but
but like for pure story, but just like it felt like a little breath of fresh air having watched the other Hammers.
Very much so,
you know.
And this was later, this is 1968, so actually this was in Hammer's down period. But I think it was one of Lee's passion projects. And that's why he managed to get it made.
But then, so then it kind of turns out that like there's this guy, I can't think of the character's
Makato.
name. Makato, yeah, and he's played by the guy from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, who he's the narrator, and he was also in
The Beast,
The Beast
Must
Must Die. So I saw him in this film today. I was like, oh, brilliant, yeah. So he plays this kind
He's
of
very
like,
good.
Oh,
as the
he's
evil,
great, actually.
Yeah.
oh, he's really good.
yeah.
And I was surprised because, you know, I suppose when I saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show first, I was like, who's this guy? He's really like legendary voice, real, you know, cool guy. But I'd never seen anything else. And then like in the space of like a month, I see him in like 2 other films.
That's a good point. Charles
You know.
Gray? Am I right? I don't know.
You could be.
I keep meaning to look him
yeah.
up, but yeah. So it turns out he's like this kind of like a satanic cult leader guy, and he uses like the power of the devil to like hypnotize people to like, you know, kill other people and stuff. So there's a bit of a mystery as to, you know, like why is all this mad stuff happening, and you know, like you're kind of watching it going like you're not sure like what people's intentions are, but then you realize like that they've been hypnotized essentially, it's really good. Like, I mean, there's this great scene where they're all standing in a circle and the daughter comes into the room.
Yeah,
and
that's
there's
where it
this big
builds up.
spider.
The
Yeah.
That
finale's
scared the crowd. I knew,
fantastic.
I was watching it going, okay, that's like a tarantula that they've somehow made bigger and it's going after the girl, but it scared the crap out of me.
But it's even before that, because I think it's Makata, whatever. His whole delivery, despite because this film is quite brave in the way that you do actually get to see the devil appears.
Yes.
So when Satan movies, or what is it? Christopher Lee says like the goat of Mendes, the devil himself. But like, so they do show you those things, which can be a bit riskier. But I think it works in this film. But
it
like
does.
his delivery as the bad guy though is quite chillingly cold, because he's very calm and practical and confident about his powers. Like he doesn't actually. You know, there's the scene where he seduces the mother in the house. He kind of
That's
almost
really
thinks control.
scary, like,
it's
that
really,
is
and
really
it's just
tense.
2 people sitting on couches looking at
Yeah,
her, but
yeah.
he talks with such gentle confidence,
Yeah.
and like that is how persuasion and all these things work. And it's just, I love that instead of having the flamboyantly over the top, like I cast thee out, he's so confident in the Dark Lord that he just knows he can do these things, and I find that quite creepy. Like, and then you go to your satanic mass, where you get the devil himself appears and like Rex fucks a fucking bomb of like holy water or something. That was brilliant. And they drive a car into it like to rescue. Like it's pretty action wise. There's quite a lot going on here. And even earlier when like cause they rescue their friend Simon from the house initially, and then he manages to escape and goes back to his house. And that's kind of a spooky bit where they break into Simon's house. They kind of walk around trying to find him, and they're upstairs and they find the book, and then all of a sudden the demon
spirit
appears.
appears. Questionable
racial voodoo type tensions with it. But then like, and that's like, this is where you realize that Christopher Lee's friend Rex is a dick, because like the first thing Christopher Lee says is don't look at the eyes, and like Rex, I swear to God, he looks down for about 3 seconds and then he just looks up, you know, and it's just like
don't walk towards him, and he starts
and
walking
he says, no, he does, and you're just kind of going, you're not even trying. Like that was because like the power of the demon did not force him to look. That was his own curiosity. And then even later on when they rescue the girl, like Rex decides to leg it off with her because he figures, I don't need the expert in Satanism. I think we can just protect her somewhere else.
And the Angel of Death as well. When the Angel of Death,
the horse.
So let's get on to the finale. It's like incredible. So basically, after all this kind of to and fro on the things, it comes to a point where Christopher Lee and 3 other people are in the house, and they realize they're going to be attacked by the forces of evil that night. And so they create a pentagram, and they're inside it, and all they have to do is stay within the pentagram while they're going to be tempted out. And so they get like the I don't know, like some of the effects maybe don't quite stand up, but they still, it's creepy. There's a giant tarantula spider that comes towards them, and like it's lovely done, as you said, Connor. Then there's the daughter of the family who are in there, like,
and
comes
the
down
mother's
the
trying to
stairs.
run out. She's trying to draw her out of the circle by having the tarantula attack the daughter, and Christopher's like, no, it's like, that's not your daughter, you know. It's brilliant. And then the horse,
it's so like it's po-faced, but it works brilliantly because Christopher Lee sells it so much with his confidence. Because before the horse, the Angel of Death on a winged horse comes in, like it's the fact that he delivers, saying, you know, like I think he pretty much announces like the Angel of Death is coming now, and you're kind of going, whoa, how's that going to look? And then literally a skulled fucking person comes in a winged horse.
What was it he said? It always has to take one. Once
like a life for a life.
But like that's an incredible bit, because I, even imagery wise, like that's something I didn't realize what film it was, but when I was younger, I clicked onto a channel one night and just seen an image of that giant spider coming towards the pentagram, and it fascinated me since then. It was only in the middle of watching it in the cinema I realized this is that film.
Yes.
And I love that whole segment.
And when the spider dies and it's like upside down, and I think at that stage they've just got like a puppet in or something like that, and it's just like all melting and smoke. And stuff coming off. It looks so cool.
I wouldn't be surprised if they just killed the fucking poor spider, you know. But it is great. And then I then after that, okay, so the daughter of this parent has actually been kidnapped by Mikado, and so they have to go and rescue
it's
him.
Again,
and, like,
it's that chase to the.
It's weird because like that bit works fine, but like I feel it doesn't quite sit as well in the rest of the film, particularly again because they all sort of arrive in separate groups at that house, and all individually are told don't walk down to the altar where the people are, and consistently they all take turns at walking down and becoming convinced over. But that's when we get into our, what I would call slightly religious problems with the storyline, because how does it work? It's like basically just the goodness of the girl, or Tannen, or whatever her name is. I have it written down there. I don't know. But like, managed to recite special words, and then the goodness of God just not only does it manage to just defeat evil there and then, but it manages to undo time and bring back to life.
And Christopher Lee very helpfully explains that.
That's a little monologue to say,
because basically, one of the girls, the girl who's with Rex for like most film, I can't think of her name, but she gets killed, and that's when they're saying like, the angel of death has to take a life, and there, he's carrying her in his arms. It's really, there's smoke coming up behind him. It's really like sad and dramatic and stuff. But then the girl recites the words, sends the devil back where he came from, and then suddenly the girl who was dead is alive again. And he goes, yes, time has once been reversed. And it's like really, like he really explains the shit out of it. And he goes, and they go, but what about Mikado? Like, where's he? It's like, but he is dead because the angel of death has to take a life for a life. And you're like, but how come she came back?
And that's what I love. That's the other thing when like Simon goes, thank God. And then Christopher Lee says, yes, he is the one we should thank. And that's the end of the film. And it's like, it's so non-subtle. It just pulls out into a wide shot, and it's just like, yep, kids, God.
They do, after that whole chase thing, they do wake back up in the circle again.
They do. That's what's confusing about it. And I was kind of going, is this dream thing? And I'm not sure about this, lads. But no, Christopher Lee's totally cool with that as well. He just, in about 8 lines, just says, this is what happened, folks. We just didn't have the money to show you it.
But you see, I think, like, just thinking about it now, like, if you have a film where the actual devil is in it, and, he's the bad guy, like, there has to be some sort of reference to God, though, doesn't there?
No,
because if you're in a world where the devil exists, then God exists in that world as well. Like, if it's something like The Exorcist, it's kind of like, is this just a demon, possessing this girl? Is this like an evil spirit or something like that? Is it not? It's not explicitly like Satan.
No, Pazuzu isn't Satan.
I guess it's a bit like, what do they call it, Deus Ex Machina, where a thing just comes in that's not being
that's
set
the problem.
up.
They didn't even develop. We'll use these special words to bring God in or anything like that. It just pops out of nowhere. Because like even in The Exorcist,
or like the stand where the hand, literally the hand of God just comes and just puts his hand.
Spoiler alert for The Stand. If you're 1,200 pages into that book, Conor Dowling really apologizes.
Or 8 hours into the film. I'm sorry.
Really great book though, really worth reading. But because I think for me the reason The Exorcist works is I love films that address kind of the religious attitudes of it, but The Exorcist kind of posits the fact of, well, this seems to prove that there is evil in the world, and it's almost if there is this evil, we need to believe in good even more so, but nothing in the film guarantees the presence of evil.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? As in, like, the presence of good. So when Karas, takes on the demon at the end and everything, that could be just his own.
Yes. Yeah. Goodness. It's not necessarily the power of God. Yeah.
But we want to believe that these good people can do it. And so like that for me is the most interesting thing, where you're kind of going, that absolutely could be a sign, which is the same as anything you want to call miracles or like the good grace of God. Yeah. Like it's where you kind of say that could be chance, or I could choose to believe that it's a good thing. And I love that area to play, while this one is just like, no, just God.
But that's
it's like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park.
But that's because they have already kind of stated like, it's definitely the devil.
It is, but they don't talk about God actually before, about fighting him with God. Okay, they do, but he does. Christopher Lee's a bit tired, but he has to go off and do some research. He just turns back over the answers. But they do use the holy water and everything. But yeah, maybe I just needed a little bit of him kind of going, the only way to defeat the devil is with the light of God. And
true.
God has his own weapons, and they just fuck a Bible at him or something. But I don't know. maybe in the book there's a little bit more time in it and it flows a bit better. Just it was a Deus Ex Machina thing. You're right, Conor.
Well, it was very much so. The last 5 minutes was just, and then this happened and that happened because of this, and now God
But
save
I love the
day.
confidence as well, though. They're not even kind of apologizing. It's like, and there you have it, folks. Go home. But no, so Devil Rides Out, I think definitely worth watching.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit cheesy in some parts, but that's also a wonderful, fun thing to watch, I think. And actually, for Satanism and occultism, not that many great films out there. I think that and Night of the
so
Demon
for all you
are
Satanists
two of the
out
probably
there-
best ones.
Night of the Demon is great. Yeah.
For all you Satanists out there listening to this, that's a movie for you.
Oh, that was an interesting thing as well, because like Makata in that was based on Aleister Crowley, the famous occultist. Because your man, the Dennis Wheatley who wrote the book, apparently invited Aleister Crowley over for dinner to talk with him, just to try and get a sense of him for the book.
No way.
Imagine inviting, because this is the time where people believed that he could actually be a member of the satanic cult. Well, he was, but an actual worshipper of Satan. And I don't know if I'd invite him around to the house. As much as I don't believe in those things, anyone else who does believe, I'm not sure I want at my dinner table. What's next, folks?
Hand of the Baskervilles.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Didn't get to see it. Ali was really recommending the shit out
So
of it.
this
but
is
I
a
didn't get a chance.
non-horror. Peter Cushing playing Sherlock Holmes. This is one of their earlier ones. I think.
Yeah.
Tell
Take
us.
us away, Connor.
Well, so basically, there's people from the Baskerville. They're kind of a rich family, I suppose, rich estate. So, they're. God, I'm terrible for remembering these plots. I know it's really hard.
There's been mysterious
It's like
deaths on the moors.
there's 10 fancy people standing in a room having a talk.
Because I don't remember, but mysterious deaths, and people believe it's down to this mythical beast.
Yeah, exactly. The family is kind of haunted. They believe in this beast on the moor. I really what I liked about it was you definitely saw little hints to American Werewolf, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? That there's something about a creature on the moor howling that's really it creates a nice atmosphere, and it's like, don't walk home on the moor.
Beware the moon, lads.
Is that like a nice rule that's kind of set up early, like don't walk home on the moor?
Well, it's the families basically. They have, I think they all suffer from a weak heart.
Okay.
And this when the guy, basically one of the guys is killed at the start. The opening is really cool. But one of the guys dies out on the moor, and then I think a guy comes home because he inherits the family thing.
Yeah, as you do.
This is the idea. And Sherlock Holmes has to investigate, of course.
It's actual Sherlock Holmes.
It's one of the most famous Sherlock Holmes stories.
Yeah. Peter Cushing's Sherlock Holmes.
Cool.
And he kind of goes, I'll follow. He sends Watson down first, and he goes, I'll have a couple of things to do. I'll follow you on. But then and I was kind of going, where's Peter Cushing? Where's he gone?
Yeah, a lot of it's Watson, actually.
Yeah. But then, halfway through the story, you realise Holmes has been down already. He got the next train down, and he'd been hanging
working
out
in the background.
Yeah, working in the background.
And then does he come out with some nice information when you need it? Does he?
Yeah, basically the kind of idea is that these Baskerville guys, they're lured by a woman out. This is the sort of what keeps happening when they die. They're being lured by this girl out onto the moor, and because they have a weak heart, there's a dog. It's actually a really nice special effect
with a mask on.
Yeah, it's a dog with a mask on it. Remember we were talking about werewolves the
Absolutely.
other day? This was a brilliant way to do the werewolf, because it was this big horrible dog, but they a really nice good mask on his face, but it looked really creepy.
Okay, yeah. Because Peter Cushing was also in a werewolf movie called The Beast Must Die.
And I will slap that smile off your face.
And in that film, that was the one, in my opinion anyway, that had kind of the worst werewolf. It was just an Alsatian with a bit of extra fur.
This one worked because I couldn't actually tell what... you're kind of looking at it going...
There's something odd about this.
Yeah, there's something odd. His head is real big, but it's kind of creepy looking. There's another, speaking of tarantula scenes, there's another really creepy tarantula scene in this where when you're first introduced, Holmes meets the new Baskerville guy. The guy's kind of shouting out to his servant, but Holmes is really there, and he comes in, and the guy is about to put his boots on, but he picks up his boot and there's a tarantula in the boot. But it starts climbing up your man's arm and up his shoulder, and Holmes is getting his cane ready.
And can he not see it? Does he not know it's on him?
Well, no, the guy's just, your man's just basically going, don't move.
Okay, yeah.
And
what was that film? Oh, like in Home Alone.
It's like more like James Bond in Doctor No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, spiders crawling up him.
I've seen Home Alone where he's like the he's got the spider on his chest.
Oh, yeah, it's a
and he
bit
has,
like
the
that.
golf club or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, it's climbing up his arm and
Right.
going up onto his shoulder, and Holmes
Don't
is like
move.
turn your head to the side,
Nice,
like, you know.
nice.
And it is quite a tense scene. And
I wonder if it's the same tarantula from Devil Rides Out.
Sure.
Could have been on the payroll.
Apparently,
Yeah.
tarantulas are incredibly
if he
fragile
survived
creatures. If
both
you,
those scenes,
Yeah.
I don't know
I'd be really
where I was
surprised.
reading, but apparently, like if a tarantula, even like if it falls a couple of feet, it'll actually die. They're really
really?
not built.
Oh,
Like
that's
we
good to
just
know.
it's just from us because they looked good on screen. Is the only reason
Yeah.
they were using these because they were furry and bigger. But apparently, they are actually really pretty shitty
ugh.
spiders. Because whenever I think of tarantulas, I just picture that fucking scene from The Beyond. Is it where they're all over the person? They're biting the lip and stuff. Like it's
no.
just
No thanks.
gross.
Because
Anyway,
they
sorry, go
do
back to-
say in the film like that, like a tarantula wouldn't kill you the bite, but basically because the Baskervilles, they all inherit this bad heart.
Oh, so
that
it
a
could
bite
kill
from
them.
a tarantula would kill them. You know,
Okay, yeah.
That's a
So-
nice thing, actually. Hereditary weakness in
Yeah,
all of them
yeah.
actually makes them more
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
I
that's
kind of
good.
like that.
So that was a good one, you reckon?
Yeah, I do. I actually enjoyed that one. I have to
Okay.
say. Yeah, yeah.
I must put that
Yeah,
one
there's
down.
actually like I know I definitely want to get on to the nanny. I want to talk about the Abominable Snowman briefly, but there was just one or two worth mentioning as well, kind of off the horror topic. You've 1 million years BC, you know, which you mightn't think you've seen, you possibly haven't, but Raquel Welch in the fur bikini, you have seen because it's just one of those iconic images.
Is that a Hammer movie?
It's a Hammer movie, and yeah, you don't think of it as a
my
Hammer
God,
movie.
no.
And of course, Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption used the poster of her
Rita
over
Hayworth?
the whole. But it's Rita Hayworth in the book.
In the
it's
book.
not in the
Okay.
film.
Oh, really?
It's Raquel Welch. Well, definitely at one point it's Raquel Welch
Oh.
in the fur bikini. I think he goes through two posters in the film, if memory
Oh,
serves me
okay.
correct, because it was over quite a period of time.
Right.
But yeah, that image of her
Oh, you're
standing
right.
there.
You're right. I
like,
remember it being now.
It's
now for a
just
second,
an
yeah.
iconic image, you know, and obviously like slightly cheap and trashy, but like posits the idea that 1 million years ago that cavemen and dinosaurs all kind of fought it out and everything like that. But,
Oh, is it a creationist fantasy?
yeah, it is absolutely. It confirms God and it puts a stunningly beautiful woman in a bikini.
Riding on top of a dinosaur.
No, she doesn't do that. It doesn't go quite that far. But there was, and it was actually, I think, quite heavily censored in America. I think they took about 8 or 9 minutes out of it initially when it came out. But you know, it's just funny because when we think of Hammer, it's so much on that set-based kind of spooky things. But they did branch out into a few bigger things. And I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but I know a few people who I've exposed to over the years. But Captain Kronos, Vampire Slayer.
I
have you heard of
couldn't
it?
get my
seen this.
hands on
I
it.
have a copy
Yeah,
of that, actually.
did you see it with me? The Hearthon, I think it was upstairs at one point.
Yeah,
showed it,
yeah,
but,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
It
yeah,
is
that's where I saw it, yeah.
like it's not a good film, but it may be a great film. You know, because it's just like all I remember of him is like, you know, he's just going around slaying vampires, but he darts forward with his little fencing sword and goes Kronos every time and stabs them and dies, and you can't not love it. And he introduced himself as Captain Kronos, vampires. Just like,
Yeah, because when I came across that one, because you mentioned to check that out.
Oh, yeah,
and,
yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah, I'll have a look into it. And it just from reading even the synopsis and seeing the photo, I was like, this seems like it's somewhat removed from their other kind of Dracula, Van Helsing kind of
Yeah,
stories.
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
they were
yeah.
they were
no, they're
trying
having a
something
bit of
different.
fun with
Like,
it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
definitely not taking it too seriously. And actually, the only other thing that I've never seen that is the Hammer House of Horror. I'd actually love to check out their TV show they did.
Okay.
They did 13 standalone episodes. They're all about an hour long, but there's supposed to be some very good ones. So it's all very different. Like one is witches, one is like so it's not just everything they've covered. I don't think they go to the Dracula or Frankenstein stuff at all. But apparently there's some pretty damn good episodes in that actually. So you know, it was one of those things that I always remember seeing in HMV RIP, you know, which is always very sad, but it was always way too expensive. But I would love to check them out because apparently they were actually properly solid. And you know, even because we were saying the Hammer it's good that they're an hour and a half. Sometimes I kind of think, 50 minutes is actually an even nicer spot for some of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Get in, get out.
Totally.
You got your kind of weirdness, and off you go.
Yeah.
So that would be something I'd love to check out. It's unfortunate I couldn't do it for this episode.
What's it called? Hammer House of Horror. It's
Hammer
a
House of
TV
Horror.
series.
Yeah. They only
Just like a one
13
kind of-
episodes.
Right,
Which is
okay.
very like a modern day Netflix thing.
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah.
13. But and I think they probably wanted to go on further than that, but I'm not sure that the funny. It was towards the later end of their their downfall, I think. But apparently that was the better stuff they created in later years. Was actually in the series. So one to check out.
There's a film I came across today actually that I started watching, and I'm actually, as we speak, I'm halfway through it, and I'm looking forward to going home to finishing it off because it was pretty good. Like, it's called The Witches, Hammer film from the 60s. Have you heard of
I
it?
haven't seen it. No.
It's got this actress in it called Joan Fontaine. Is that
The name
is her
rings a
name?
bell.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
was in Rebecca. And she
good,
won an
yeah.
Oscar for her role in the film Suspicion with Cary Grant. I think it was another.
I love Rebecca's one of my
Hitchcock
favorite films.
Rebecca's
Yeah.
brilliant. Yeah, like so she would have been kind of the
Gotcha.
romantic interest in Rebecca. She's brilliant because she just, you know, when I was watching it, I was like, there was just something that really kind of struck me about her, and I was like, I read up a little bit on it. And basically, The Witches, it's made in the 60s, so it would have been like 25 years after Rebecca. But it's about this woman who's like doing some. It starts off really quick, like she's working in some research educational place in some jungle in Africa.
Christopher Lee comes in.
No,
Gotta get her out of here.
You're just waiting for her.
But she's in Africa, and these like voodoo witch doctors come in and they descend upon her, and then it just cuts to like, you know, a couple of years later in like some small like English town where she's now moved to this small English town and to be a school teacher. So it's just like a million miles away from like kind of the world of like, you know, voodoo and witchcraft, and like, you know something went down over there, but you don't necessarily know what it was, but she's really like shaken by it. But you know, now she's in this nice little town, so she's just like gonna go about her day here. But she's the real kind of like you know, that kind of investigative gaze, like, you know, that really kind of like, there's something not right in this town, and there's some weird people, and there's talk of witchcraft, and you know, there's like people disappearing and stuff happening to the kids, and she's kind of like investigating and stuff, you know. And it's pretty cool. It's based on a book called The Devil's Own, not the Brad Pitt one, not the IRA movie, but it's based on a book called The Devil's Own. And apparently this actress Joan Fontaine read the book, fell in love with it, and brought it to Hammer and said,
it doesn't sound
"I
very
wanna-"
Hammer.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
obviously like a witch's thing, but it sounds like there's a lot more going on story wise.
Yeah, like I mean, it definitely kind of kept me going, like, you know. So I really want to just, you know,
to be continued.
Okay.
For the
yeah,
next podcast, how it
absolutely, yeah.
ended.
But it's cool. It's worth watching. Doesn't seem to be like a witchy kind of witches film, but more of a witchcraft kind of thing.
Okay.
But definitely there was a bit of a vibe, like, I mean, a very small kind of vibe of, you know, Wicker Man, you know, the person going to the small town and weird stuff going on.
What's the other one that they did? Was it Blood and Blood and Satan's Claw is not Hammer, is it? It's just one of those ones that looks like Hammer. Never mind.
I don't know.
That was another one, the folk horror season they showed in the IFI.
Okay.
Also, a tiny little bit of a buzz of Rosemary's Baby off it. You know, just that thing where, like, at the start, everyone seems really, like, nice and perfect in this little town, but you know there's going to be some sinister twists along the way, like, so.
And does it suffer from any of the like back projection type stuff? Is it in that zone of Hammer horror, or does it?
Like, you mean special effects wise?
Yeah.
So far, it's
none.
just been fairly out in the real world, you know, so a lot of, like, kind of natural light, and
Okay,
it's
cool.
picturesque, like, English town, so
Right.
it doesn't look kind of like crappy sets as well.
Yeah,
like a lot
yeah,
of the time, it looks kind of decent. You know, apparently the filmmakers weren't really happy with how it turned out. But
That sounds
There's
like the story
not-
of virtually every fucking film. Welcome to our world, folks.
there's not much info about it online, so I don't know if it's one of the more well-known Hammer ones. It's probably much more lesser known.
It sounds
but
like an interesting one to
Witches,
check out.
Yeah, interesting to check out. Yeah.
I have to talk about the Abominable Snowman before we go, but Connor, do you have any other ones there apart from the nanny?
Really? No, if you want to, that was pretty much most of the ones I watched. I think Reptile was the only other one I kind of
is that any fun?
But it's all right. I mean,
Tell me there is a giant reptile man in it.
there is, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, don't worry. Rest assured, there
His
is.
eyes are like in a fixed position. You know?
Does he have to turn his head to look? Now, in fairness, Batman had to
Yeah.
do that for many years ago. So. Oh,
Yeah.
actually, like shout out! Did anyone see the IFI
I have
announced
tickets.
70mm screening of Batman
I have
at the end
tickets.
of March?
Which Batman?
The
First one.
Keaton one.
Ah, no way.
Yeah.
Oh,
70 mil
that's
screening.
my favorite one.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
I think I'm gonna have to get because I presume
Okay, I'm
that's
gonna
gonna
go over
sell
there.
out. So yeah, I think
what date is it?
I think it's 27th or 28th of March, or maybe they're doing two screenings
Okay.
of it. But
Ah, okay.
Batman 70mm.
Yeah.
Why not?
We should all go. I actually have a spare ticket if one of you guys want to take.
I'll
mine.
take it.
Cool.
Okay, I'll go and buy one. We are actually just underneath the IFI, so it's not really a problem to do. Do you know, actually, without getting off topic completely, but for me, even the original Batman, like what I get excited about is just the amazing confidence of that opening title with that music and just the logo turning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just reveals, like, it's so bold, because like at that stage there hadn't been a kind of a serious Batman. And it took its like 3 minutes of time, whatever,
Yeah.
that with the credits
Yeah,
to actually
yeah.
just build up to this crescendo, and it just
I saw that recently as well, and some of the cinematography in it is just really like nicely done. Like they were trying to clearly replicate a lot of that Frank Miller
Yeah.
stuff, you know, in the comics. So I'd be really interested to see it on the big screen. I've never seen it on the big screen.
Chance
Never
to see
seen
something
it
like that
70
with 70
mil.
mil. It's just like it's a dream come true. So folks, we'll see you there.
I mean, it is just since mentioning Tim Burton there, it is interesting with Sleepy Hollow how that was influenced a lot by Hammer.
Oh, completely. That's his
Yeah,
love letter
yeah.
to it,
Yeah,
really, isn't
yeah.
it? Like
It's like the paint, the blood that's like red, like paint.
Oh, the blood
Yeah.
is beautiful, yeah. Especially when everything else is so desaturated, like
Yeah,
you know, the
yeah.
rest of the film, it's so like neutral kind of tones. Then you just have this blood that looks like radioactive. Like
Yeah.
I need to give that another go actually, because I didn't, you know, I've some I either absolutely adore some Tim Burton's and other ones I'm a lot cooler on, and it just didn't quite
I
work
like
for me,
it,
but I know a lot of people love it.
I mean, the plot is utterly convoluted.
Yeah.
but-
it's just really stylish, isn't it?
yeah, but I actually I do like it.
Headless Horseman, like I am always on board for
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
like that.
I remember seeing that in the cinema when it came out, and actually I went to see it twice in the cinema, and the second time I went to see it, the projector ate the print, and it was the only time that's ever happened when I've been in a cinema.
right.
But,
It's always a bizarre feeling, isn't
yeah,
it?
you're like, but I've just eaten half a bag of popcorn. It's only been 10 minutes. You know?
Right, back on topic. Abominable Snowman, I just want to very briefly touch on. So very quickly, like again, stars Peter Cushing. Really? But yeah, who would have thought? But so yeah, very simple kind of setup. I think there's a couple. They're traveling to a Buddhist monastery. They're on, I don't know, some kind of an adventure. And this other expedition turns up with this guy called, I think it's Friend or Friend. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. But he's on an expedition to discover the Yetis, or the Abominable Snowman, as you say. And so the guy in this couple just kind of goes, well, I'd love to come along to do that, and just leaves the wife in the monastery and heads off to do it. But like, that's fine, because he's interested in going there from a scientific viewpoint, but he doesn't realize the guy leading the
It's
expedition
for
just
science,
wants,
darling. You wouldn't understand.
But the guy running the thing is actually just there for fame and fortune and doesn't care at all.
Right.
And this is an interesting one where, like in the same in the Quatermass ones, that there's actually genuine kind of, there's a heartfelt kind of message to the world in the middle of these kind of films, and that not all the Hammer ones had. But so they go after it basically, and eventually they manage to shoot and kill a Yeti, to cut a long story short. And they stick around to try and capture a live one, because that's really what they want, because that would be the perfect discovery. And obviously the killing of the Yeti has caused, you hear these really nasty howls out in the snow and in the fog. So of course, you know, it's on sets, this one, so it's mostly foggy things, but it's quite creepy just hearing the howling out there and not knowing. At one point you see a very hairy hand appear underneath the tent and pull something out. So you kind of realize, okay, I'm going to see something. But what's interesting about it is, so you have this dead Yeti, and eventually they kind of realize, okay, we're not going to capture a live one, so let's just cut our losses and head off. They've lost one or two of their members at this stage, but all the members of their party end up dying or being killed either by their own silliness, like either by falling off a cliff, one guy literally just falls off a cliff, or they get crushed by an avalanche or anything. So actually it's all under their own doings. It's not the Yetis that do it. And in the end, Peter Cushing's character is Peter Cushing, sorry, he's the last guy left alive, and he's in this cave with the Yeti, and you realize they're coming. And he's terrified and he's pressed up, and they come in this shadowy way. It's really quite creepy. These big hulking, basically kind of like Bigfoot, you know, type creatures. And they come in through the shadows, and you can only see bits of details of it through the light. And they're hovering there, and he's absolutely petrified. And then it becomes apparent that all they want is to take their own dead so they can bury it. And they don't harm him at all. And he comes to the realization that they're actually a very intelligent species, and they're literally up in these mountains biding their time till they can reclaim the earth after mankind destroys itself.
Whoa.
And it's just that he heads back down to the monastery at the end. A rescue team come and find him, and of course, you know, he doesn't mention. And
How does he know that they're biding their time?
He just
Does
kind
he
of
say
knows.
that out loud?
Yeah, no,
They're clearly biding their time.
It is like, you know, one of those things where you can, and because I have a problem with that, like in scripts nowadays, I'd love if I could write that, but back then people could kind of like look. Even actually, I watched Michael Mann's Manhunter the other day because it's one of my favorite films, and like there's bits where William Peterson looks out a window and like basically does it. I'll get you, beer baron. Like he does. He's like, I'm coming for you, you son of a bitch. I'm coming. Like, you know, you were allowed kind of just say that's what I'm thinking. But he gets back to the Buddhist monastery, and the Lama says, like, did you see anything up there? And he says no, so that they can live their existence up there and not ruin it. But it's a nice, because, you know, it's just that kind of concept of the perceived fears being out there, and you presume the worst about something, the unknown, when actually the worst behavior is probably in your own back door. So, you know, which folks today, you could learn a lot from this. So, well, you know, it's not the greatest one, but it's not a bad one. I think worthy of check.
I love that. I think that sounds great, and I was definitely interested in checking it out, but I couldn't find it. But I always
Shudder for everyone. You can get that one on Shudder. And Curse of Frankenstein's on Shudder. So is Quatermass 1 and 2. So
okay.
anyone who has it there.
And a bunch of them are available on YouTube as well, aren't they? Like, I think Hammer have a channel, don't they?
I don't know if they do. I know Trauma have all their stuff on YouTube. I'm not sure, but definitely, like, Shudder have a few of them, and they're actually really nice. It's amazing with some of these, like, the new high definition transfers of some of these films look so prettier. Because, like, when we would have seen, like, the Hammer ones and everything before, they were pretty grungy and messed up. Like, when you see them all cleaned up, it does give you a new appreciation for some of it. It also exposes the weaknesses.
But like, even with that Abominable Snowman thing, like, I think that sounds great, but I always find it so funny in films when it's like they need it to be like a slasher movie about Abominable Snowman, but that's not what the film is about. But they still need all the people to be killed.
Yes.
So they just have them like dying by accident.
Absolutely.
I think that's so funny when that happens.
No, you definitely do. Right, I want to talk about The Nanny.
Oh yeah.
So guys, who have you watched
I watched
recently?
The Nanny, yes.
I saw The Nanny literally about 15 years ago. It was just on telly one night, and I do remember it was one of those films, you know, when you instantly see about 2 seconds of a movie and you know it's good.
Yes.
You just know by whatever it is, the camera, the acting, I was like, shit, looks like a great film. And yeah, so I think I've watched it about 2 or 3 times, but many years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm familiar with the plot. And,
I might give you a lemon because it's definitely worth watching. Like, I do want to talk a little bit about this one because I just fucking love it. But Mr. Downing, do you want to go or?
Yeah, like, I mean, I watched it last night, and based on you guys' recommendations, you know, and I really didn't know what to expect from it, you know, especially after seeing like the kind of Draculas and
I would call it a non-Hammer. No offense to Hammer, but this is the least Hammer film.
Totally, and then when I saw Betty Davis was in it, I was like, oh wow, because like, I mean, I loved, you know, whatever happened to Baby Jane,
all about Eve,
that's
you know,
all that stuff, you know what I mean. So that kind of hooked me, and like, I mean, I know what you're saying about, like, you know, recognizing a film and saying like this looks really good. I don't even know what it is, but it looks good. But I think it was probably the fact that Betty Davis was in it that would make me keep watching it, you know. So yeah, it's basically about this family living in England, and it's a father, mother, and their young son, and they have a nanny who like lives in the house, played by Betty Davis. And there's
when it starts, like the son isn't even there.
Yeah, the son isn't even there, exactly, and things are kind of strained in the family, and there's a bit of a weird dynamic.
The mother's really upset for some reason. She's upset that her son's returning after 2 years from some place.
Yeah,
this big question of why and what did he do.
Yeah, so they pick up their son from, like, he's been in some kind of like boarding school type of thing.
Mental hospital.
Yeah, like for kids, like, you know, and the kid is like, he's like playing pranks on all of his female minders and stuff like that.
Yeah, they find him
like hanging. That's the first time you see the kid. He's like hanging from the rafters, like, you know, from a noose. And it kind of reminds me a lot of Harold and Maude. Have you ever seen that? He's always faking his own death and stuff like that.
This kid is younger though, isn't he?
He's much younger. Oh, he's a child.
And like it's revealed to be a prank and everything. But yeah, it's just because like even just on the very beginning of it, like, because I'm with you, Connor, on the fact that like it just feels like a great
black and white as well.
The Hammer's last black and white film actually. But yeah, because it opens like, instead of the Hammer thing usually where you got kind of some kind of a big bravado thing, it just opens on this kid's merry-go-round going around and kids just kind of chanting and singing, and there's this happy music, and you're kind of going, what am I watching? This isn't a Hammer movie. And then the nanny kind of walks by and she's feeding the ducks and she buys flowers, and it's just.
But the way you were saying earlier about Hammer not having that many interesting kind of like directed shots and stuff, like even that opening shot, it's a shot on the playground or the merry-go-round, and then it pans and the nanny is off in the background walking, so it kind of pans and follows her, like, so it moves off them onto her. It's really nicely done.
Do we know who directed this or what else?
No, I did look it up actually. I don't know. Like. It was nothing major of particular worth, I don't think. I think I recognized one thing, but yeah, bizarrely, because I kind of thought this could be someone who all their films might be really worth checking out. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, there's a very kind of weird tone about like when the nanny comes home and like these parents, like they seem to be bizarrely kind of counseling each other, and the mother is just traumatized. She can't go to pick up the kid because she's all like. You know,
she's looking at pictures of her daughter, who hasn't really necessarily been mentioned as well, but you can tell that there's something.
Yeah, it basically is eventually revealed that the daughter died 2 years ago.
Yeah,
and Joey's been gone since then. And it's weird because like the whole way through, actually, kind of it slowly reveals its story. It doesn't kind of rush into kind of like it kind of because she's looking at the pictures of the daughter for a little bit before we actually even find out. About the daughter missing. We don't really find out what happened to the daughter until quite later on in the story. But I just thought like what's mad about it is, you know, obviously when Joey gets picked up from the mental asylum, there's a very strong tension between Joey, the kid, and I don't know what age do you reckon he is?
He's about 8.
8, yeah, something like that. Yeah. And the nanny. and it's kind of weird because the nanny has that kind of cold sternness to her.
Yeah.
But also, she defends Joey and actually allows him to do pretty much like she puts up with all his kind of BS around the house. And Joey, we know because of his pranks and stuff, isn't exactly the most reliable person either and could be a shit stirrer.
Yeah, exactly. So you're kind of led to believe that Joey is this little menace of a child, you know, and he's being horrible to his old nanny, you know, who seems
everything
to
she says is wrong. Like,
yeah, exactly. And she takes everything on the chin, and she just kind of like, you know, oh, whatever he wants, you know. But and then you kind of see him with the parents, like the mother is very kind of childlike.
But the mother is like, this is the interesting thing because I actually think this film, like for me, this is a Hitchcock worthy type film. Like it really is, because there's a lot of, and it actually feels like I would not have been surprised if someone told me it was a Hitchcock film because there's all those themes of mental illness and depression in all the characters. Because the mother is clearly either suffering from post-traumatic stress, but definitely has depression issues.
Yes.
You know, and because the nanny in this house of her son was also her nanny who just never left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And it's kind of, there's a weird kind of creepiness there, like that, she's never fully formed into an adult because of it. Like, the nanny still brushes her hair and
stuff,
and encourages her and, like, kind of manages her, I guess. Because, like, the husband in this one is a very traditional, old-fashioned one where whenever the family's in trouble, he heads off to the country club. There's just no interest. And
then I think probably around the end of the first act, he, like, goes off for business, basically, for the rest of the film, and you never see him again.
No, and he seems very unbothered by his wife's distress or any of the other problems.
He just wants everyone else to sort it out while he goes off, like, you know.
It's not his thing, like, and I guess Nanny kind of fills the hole in that. Like, she, because of his lack, she takes that kind of control point in it. But the mother's so susceptible to the nanny that she just presumes the very best.
But then literally about half an hour into the film, the little boy is talking to his neighbor, this girl who lives upstairs, and he says, you know, oh, my parents are horrible to me. They think I killed my little sister. And you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Like, that's the first thing you hear of anyone.
So yeah, they think he killed it.
He just kind of says it offhand, like.
Well, he says it really interesting because he says she was murdered.
Okay.
And he got sent away for it for 2 years. And you're kind of going, that's pretty, because like murdered is very different than killed or died.
Yeah,
like, it's very direct.
Yeah,
and this idea that the kid was just sent away.
Yeah.
And you kind of presume again, because it doesn't tell you, like, he doesn't even say, but I didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's just these two things happened. And you're kind of going, that's
so you realize
up.
there's kind of more to the dynamic than meets the eye, and you can kind of feel there's going to be some mad reveal like later on, you know, like there's going to be some mad twist.
And it's just because even like it's slightly explained why later on, but until you know what's going on, there's very uncomfortable tones of even like abuse in the situation, because there's a very disturbing bit where Joey has to go to his mother and he begs her to make Nanny promise not to come into the bathroom when he's having a bath.
Yeah.
And that, like, you know, there is a context that's explained later on, and I don't know, maybe that's just seen through modern eyes and the way we see the world and everything, but it's very upsetting to see this little kid pleading just to make someone promise not to come in.
And no one believes him. You know what I mean? No one believes him because of all the things he's already done at this age. We don't believe him because, you know, we've seen him playing pranks, like literally hanging himself, you know, to scare people. So, you know, nowadays, like, if, you know, a kid came in and said something like that, you know, they would be firing the nannies like straight away, like, you know.
There'd be much. They just.
But back then, it was kind of kids should be like seen and not heard and all that stuff, you know. So
there's a beautiful one. I think he says to his friend, the girl upstairs, where he says, like, you know, about the parents or just about adults, is like, you know, they never believe me, and the girl just goes, they never do. Yeah. And it's just, there's a whole thing in this whole film about the failure of adults. And not. I don't know whether it's trying to attack adults or it's just kind of admitting that actually the grown-ups are the fucked up ones to some extent, because the kid actually is able to process this on a realistic way, but the parents are kind of carrying on as if they're handling it, but actually none of them are handling it.
They're actually just shirking their responsibility.
Because the dad just runs off, the mum just can't cope emotionally, Nanny's just shut down. Like,
what is the kind of nanny's motivation, or does it go into it?
Well, that's kind of a big twist, though.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I kind of, because I'm desperate to talk about it, but I don't know. Like, do we want to say, like, you know, we're now going to discuss that, because we're coming to, like,
maybe not, because actually I'm interested enough to watch it again now.
But a couple of things that I would say, even just the way we were saying about like certain kind of shots and stuff in it. Like, there was just this really cool thing, you know, where it's a flashback, because there's a couple of flashbacks.
The flashbacks are very important as well, because the girl is adorable.
Oh my god, the little girl who actually
so we see
dies.
the sister.
Yeah, she's the cutest little kid, and she's a really good actor as well. You know. But there's this thing with the bath, and when, you know, that shot, it's a long shot looking down a hallway, and you just see Nanny like opening the bath.
I think we can just talk about some of that without being on a spoiler thing, because there's the reveal of what happened. And then, but there's much more reveals later on about the context of that change it. So eventually, the kid sits down with the girl upstairs and tells her the story of that day, and
the day when his sister
died, and so it's like it's that really kind of sad thing you could see traumatizing someone, because basically the kid's playing with a train set, doesn't want to play with his sister decides to give her doll a bath. She stands on a stool and she just slips and falls in and knocks herself unconscious. And they'd been left alone because Nanny had gotten a phone call and left. So they were on their own, unsupervised. And Nanny comes back in and she just says, "Okay, children, time for your bath." She walks into the bathroom but doesn't look in the bath and just turns the taps on and walks out. And there's this whole scene of her walking around the house just putting her coat up and everything. And all the time we can just hear the water running in the bath. And it's just... What's amazing about that is, and there's music in parts of The Nanny, but they completely cut it for that bit. For a couple of the bits later on, and it makes them so really unnervingly disturbing, because it's that great thing that Hitchcock did. Like, all we know is, like, he is now set up. We know the kid's in the bath. We know she's unconscious. When we hear the water running, we don't need to see anything in there. Just hearing that water running is like a ticking time bomb, you know? And it, you know, again, the simplicity of images, because I think it's much more disturbing than the her ones. When eventually she finds the kid in the bath, it's literally just a kid floating upside down in the bath, face down, and it's an image ingrained in your brain. Like,
but then there's also a thing where she looks in the bath and she sees the kid.
Well, that's where it gets on.
Like, in the bath, and you're kind of like, oh, what's going on?
How far can you see that? Yeah, because that's we hear from the kid's point of view, but that's as far as we get. The nanny finding the body.
But just the way the flashback ends, because
and then Nanny's version comes later on, and we understand why she left the house and what happens afterwards.
And why she is trying to silence Joey as well. You know, she's very attached to the mother.
Well, see that, you see, fuck it. Like, I really want to get into this.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, it's a short movie. It's only like it's only an hour and a half long.
Can we? Because that's not quite my reading. Like, Connor. Can we talk? No, it's okay. You can say no.
I mean, I've seen the film.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Well, you see, I think it's definitely worth people watching it. Yeah, and I definitely think it's a film that would be better discovering it as you go along, as opposed to knowing.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those films that's probably worth.
It's probably better.
It is, but like, I'd say to anyone, like, you know, stop the podcast and watch it. But like, you know, it's one of those ones afterwards. I think you want someone to talk about it, just because like we can talk about it off camera or off radio, whatever we're on.
Yeah, it's so funny. Spoilers from like what 19?
No, it's just because it's a really interesting one because of the way that it kind of deals with these things, and actually, unlike most modern films that deal with mental health issues, like Split, which I might mention later on, and a lot of other ones, I think they absolutely bottle it. Either you're trying to approach those issues or not. And actually, with Hammer, I didn't expect it, but Hammer, right up to the end of this film, handles emotional distress and trauma and doesn't trivialize it. It doesn't turn it into just bad and good. It's a very complicated thing, and it's very sad. Yeah. And I think that's what's brilliant about it, because you just don't expect that, especially from a Hammer one. You expect it to be
especially when you already have a good bit of information. You're kind of like, oh, this is what I think's going on.
Constantly, you're switching from side to side, saying maybe it is just Joey, or maybe she is.
And then by the end of it, you're like, it's you know what it is. It's that thing that we're always trying to capture in our films and in our writing. It's that bittersweet irony of life, you know what I mean? It's that thing tragic. That makes you just nod along and go, fuck, that is exactly what.
And it feels very real. Like, you know, it really, really does. And it upset me the first time I saw it, and it still bothers me. Again, those simple images of the child floating face down and thing, but just
the setup of it, though, like you're saying, the ticking time bomb thing, that's
it's
really
tragic. Every character it is, and none of them are just evil, bad people. But that doesn't make any of the tragedy any less, you know. And that's what's brilliant. If you can, you understand, and yet it doesn't make it any less disturbing. So, look, if you haven't seen it, guys, I think absolutely track that one down. For me, like, The Devil Rides Out and stuff is the most fun for me and those kind of things. But like, as far as a great film that would happily sit beside a lot of Hitchcock's better films, The Nanny, I think hands down, gotta go for.
Agreed.
Any other on a Hammer before we do any other business, or actually the Hammer revival.
I was just going to say that. You know,
go for it, Connor.
And I'm trying to think of the Daniel Radcliffe Woman in
Black.
But
so this started with Wakewood, an Irish horror film. It was the first Hammer revival. Well, no, sorry, I don't know. Does anyone remember something from the Ray from the? No, not Ray from the Grave. I have it written down here. Hold on, what is it called?
Was this a Hammer revival?
It was the first Hammer one that came back. They released it on MySpace in 24-minute segments. So
wait,
this is
24 24-minute segments
No,
or 20
by 4 minutes.
All right.
So 4 minute segments. Beyond the Rave instead of Beyond the Grave. Do you see what they did there?
Okay.
And I remember
Okay.
being really excited at the time because it was all Hammer's coming back and they're embracing social media. You could see how the executives were kind of going, look, we're going to be current. We're going to be part of this.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I
MySpace
watched
is
the
where it's
first
at.
2 parts or something. It's just awful. I think they did eventually release the parts together. I've never seen it all, but it was pretty terrible, and that kind of was that. And then Wakewood came along, which you know, quite a lot of people seem to have quite a bit of fondness. It's a very sort of Irishy version of Pet Sematary with a bit of Wicker Man mixed in there. Aidan Gillen and I can't remember who
made
shot
by
it, but
Fantastic Films, wasn't it?
yeah, it was fantastic in conjunction with Hammer. And you know, so that was kind of it, but that wasn't the big part. And then they kicked into Let Me In. Obviously,
Okay,
the
right,
Right One In remake with Chloe Grace Moretz and I can't remember who else. You know, I love the original. I wasn't a big fan of the remake.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard when you have such a perfect original
Exactly.
film, you
Well,
know?
everything I loved about the first one, they kind of Americanized up in the remake that wasn't great. But, you know, a big film, though, and I think did quite well business-wise because most people hadn't seen it, The Right One In. Then you had The Resident in 2011, which had Christopher Lee in it, which I haven't seen.
Okay, I haven't seen
And then the bigger ones are Woman in Black, The Quiet Ones, and Woman in Black 2, Angel of Death.
which I haven't seen.
Yeah, do you know what? It's kind of disappointing because I like the idea that it's set in a different time period, kind of World War II, I think, but it's missing it because The Woman in Black, I think, is the standout one there. I think it's a pretty fucking good film.
Oh man, like I have to say with The Woman in Black, because it is a remake as well of, you know,
It's based on a book as well.
Yeah, and a famous play. Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I had again through the horror-thon, or the horror club, I'd seen the original, you know, Woman in Black, which has one of the best scares.
Was that a BBC kind of thing, or was it? Yeah, I don't think
exactly.
Was it done
Yeah,
through Hammer or no?
No. I think they bought the rights.
Okay.
But yeah, original has one of the greatest scares of all time, up there with Exorcist 3 in the corridor.
Yeah.
They're my 2 favorite
Man,
scares.
we have to have a chat about Exorcist 3 and some of these. Like, we'll do like
I gotta watch
not
it
love
first.
sequels. Psycho 2, Exorcist 3.
Sequels would be
really,
interesting,
really good.
actually. Yeah.
Anyway, though, like, go on.
But yeah, just with Woman in Black, the scares
Daniel Radcliffe
work.
hot off Harry Potter.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yet trying to break that mold. So playing it like a father and yet still seeming very young.
Yeah, and it's a bit like that Conjuring in a way that it's a lot of what it's doing is stuff you've seen before, but it's just very well executed.
Yeah,
you know,
and bold enough actually to go back to those kind of just older creeps of just seeing the woman in like silhouette kind of at doorways and like she does jump out from time to time, but it certainly didn't go to gore. Like it was really relying on those old fashioned kind of haunted house things, and it was just nice to see. And what was nice to see was that mainstream audiences like responded to that and actually really enjoyed it. Like it was a big hit and a very dark ending for a 12s film.
It's a 12s?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Jesus, I just remember.
It's fucking like very kind of. I remember in the cinema, kind of like for me, you're kind of going fair enough, but I remember a lot of people around me going, "You can't end a film like that. That's not okay." I don't know why that's the revival though kind of just disappeared with that because they were big hits.
Like, are they? What is the story? Has it?
I tried looking it up and I couldn't see any official. We're not doing any more, but I think Woman in Black 2 was not as
when did that
successful.
come out?
I think that was 2014 was Woman in Black 2.
Oh, right.
And there's the quiet ones in between. I don't know if you saw that one. It's kind of set in a house. It's a scientist who's trying to prove that like poltergeist activity and a few other phenomena are manifestations of people with mental distress or creating it. So there's this girl locked in a room and it's this professor and 2 of his kind of interns or something like that trying to help him investigate it. And there's things, it's a nice enough setup, but it kind of resorts to just same old, nothing that interesting in it. Like nothing that bad in it, but just, you know.
And is that, you know, the way the original ones would have all been made in England and that kind of thing?
That one I think was English,
Okay.
the quiet ones. I think. I can't remember the main professor in it. I know I've seen him and stuff, and I just can't think offhand what it is. But but then Woman in Black, they were made in England as well. Actually, I think they did because part of the trying to be true to the Hammer thing, but they felt like very American films.
Yeah.
You know?
So how did that come about that Hammer was like, we're making a comeback? Like, I mean,
someone else bought the
label,
kind of,
Okay.
to try it, so they saw the potential in it
Right,
to try
okay.
and bring it. And, you know, like Connor, you were saying earlier on, the whole idea of wanting to do your own kind of like Hammer-like studio, like it's definitely a very appealing thing. I guess Blumhouse really have nailed that.
Blumhouse are the
that's
sort of
of
modern
our
day.
generation. Like, you know, like I can't remember the last time I saw a trailer for a horror from the cinema that didn't have Blumhouse
Absolutely.
at the beginning. You know, but
or at least one that you thought looked like a decent film. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
you know, and it's a really good comparison, really, because when you think about what Blumhouse does, and I'm quite a fan of their approach, and I quite enjoy a lot of their films. Not all their films are brilliant. But yeah, like Hammer, you're guaranteed a certain thing. You know,
Yeah.
it's going to be a certain amount of polished. There's going to be a certain amount of things, and it'll have enough kind of like, polish basically on it that it's going to be watchable usually and like, you know, relatively enjoyable with a couple of good jumps.
Yeah, even if we had our own trauma, like that would be good enough for me.
That's actually because like they're all up on YouTube, and I started trying to rewatch one or two of them.
Some
because
of them
I looked
are
at it,
great.
When I was younger, like, you know, when you get them on VHS, like Class of Nukem High.
I loved
like,
Class of Nukem
Yeah,
High.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the original Toxic Avenger
Yeah.
sequels a little less so, even though they are horrendously disgusting.
I
Trumbo and
find
Juliet.
some of their modern ones a bit more
Poultry guys?
unbearable,
Yeah, I haven't- that one I was
unbearable to watch.
curious
Like,
about.
you know, I find like the 80s kind of ones and the Toxic Avengers and Class Nukem High and stuff. I find they're like, I enjoy those, but the more modern ones, they just look like absolute crap. Like,
Yeah,
you know, that
but
I
it's
just,
almost a deliberate, like,
no
as in,
offense.
like,
You know?
no, but it's the same with the Roger Corman. Like, you know, I have huge respect for Roger Corman and all, and that, and his a lot of the films that he made, but like, still, one's getting churned out under those labels, but they're still knowingly completely rubbish, and it's kind of exploiting certain people who just get a kick out.
I
of
mean,
those
they
things as
do,
opposed to-
but yeah. Also, I mean, I was watching the Poultry Guys documentary, and I mean, they do just get a bunch of students to work for free
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
these movies.
absolutely.
You know,
What about Asylum? They're like a modern day independent studio.
is this like Sharknado?
Sharknado, yeah,
And they do-
Transmorphers, Titanic 2.
They do mockbusters. So
Mockbusters,
yeah, but they do a lot of kind of like horror stuff and
They do
sci-fi.
Z Nation as well, do they? Though that's actually quite worth watching. That's on Netflix, a zombie kind of series.
Oh,
it's,
really?
it's like
Okay.
if The Walking Dead had a more fun sense of humor to it.
Oh wow, I'd
Because
like
I
to
find
see
The
that.
Walking Dead kind of, and I like bleak and depressing, but I think the TV show isn't, like, the comics are great, the TV
Comics are
show
great, yeah.
isn't for me. But yeah, Z Nation has that kind of almost kind of Day of the Dead type thing where like the characters are kind of archetypes, but that's kind of fun, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And if a guy's going into a room with a sword and taking on zombies, like, you know, there's a kind of a wink at the camera, but not that much that it's a really irritating thing.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I would say I watched the first couple of episodes of it and I thought, like, you know what, this is fun now. I haven't gone back to it, but like I would say, you know, give it a shot.
Cool.
And that, you know, I'm pretty sure that's Asylum. Any other business? I have other business.
Oh,
Hammer
tell us.
talk.
Yeah.
Business as are we done Hammer?
Yeah, I think we're
Okay.
done. Are we
Yeah,
done,
yeah,
Hammer?
yeah.
You know, so general kind of thumbs up. You know, still worth
I
checking
think so.
out.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, for me, I'd know a concept of Hammer go,
Yeah.
even though I sort of had a vague idea. But yeah,
I actually, surprisingly, you know, sometimes you do one of these episodes and you've seen like 20 werewolf movies or something like that.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to watch something else. I actually want to go back and watch more Hammers
yeah.
now. You know what I mean? There's a couple that I didn't, like, I literally have to finish off The Witches when I get home, but like there's a couple, like some of the Draculas and stuff.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
want to be
That
in
I
the
just
mood,
wanna
isn't it? It's
check
kind of
out,
thing where,
like, yeah.
for me, this is like my Hitchcock films. It's kind of a Sunday afternoon
Yes,
kind of thing.
that's
yeah.
exactly what I was going to say. It's like a Sunday afternoon kind of thing. It's kind of comforting and
Yeah, I'm just gonna
nostalgic
sit down
and stuff.
and watch
yeah.
a thing. Yeah, like, you know, it's not for me on a Saturday night. I wouldn't be racing home to watch,
Exactly.
like, you know,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
Dracula.
gathering gangs of friends to watch them.
Middle of a party, dudes, sit down. It's the darkness, man.
We're watching Frankenstein number 8.
If only they put the numbers after. For me, that was the pride and joy for the Friday the 13th, is that they were so
Yes.
unabashedly admitted what they were until part 9. But,
Yeah, I remember I went on a binge of the Friday the 13th movies and I was like, yeah, just watch Friday the 13th, part 8.
And I love saying it. It's like,
Still
yeah,
going.
part 6, Jason Lives. I always want to put the bit after as well, like part 7, The New Blood. Like, fucking right. And speaking of Friday the 13th, folks, you know, Friday the 13th cancelled. The new one, completely dead in the water. It was delayed and they have literally just shut down production. Paramount are not making it. It looks like they might sell it on to someone else. I think Blumhouse might be curious about that. But like,
this was the one that was going to be found footage, and there was a vote.
It was going to be found footage, and they
was
got
a
rid of
vote
that.
online, no
and
way.
then they were like, everything nowadays, they were going to sort of the younger Jason thing. Though I think what they were leaning on was trying to be that it wasn't all going to be the past stuff, but it was going to touch on his parents and stuff. And, you know,
Isn't
it's
there
very-
like a Friday the 13th show on at the moment?
There was a Friday the 13th TV show back in the day. There was like 3 or 4 seasons of them. Cronenberg directed one of the episodes. I have them all, actually. I haven't watched Cronenberg's one. It's kind of curious. It's set in an antique
What's
shop.
that show, Dead of Summer? What's that about? Is that like a slasher kind of?
There's a few slashery kind of ones out there.
There's a show on at the moment called Dead of Summer, and
Is that one where one person dies each episode type
I
thing?
don't know. Yeah, I thought for some reason I thought it was something to do with Friday the 13th because it's all like it's real summer camp kind of like horror movie, you know, summer camp slasher movie. But speaking of horror news, did you guys hear about Halloween?
Yeah, let's talk about this.
David Gordon Green, Danny McBride involved with John Carpenter
So
for a
let's
Halloween
be clear. This David
sequel.
Gordon Green, the director of Pineapple Express and the director of Your Highness, and Danny McBride, actor of Your Highness, are now directing one of my most beloved franchises.
Okay, Your Highness is a bit unfair. Have you ever seen Observe and Report?
No.
Seth Rogen plays the mall cop.
I've seen This Is the End. He's also directed by David Gordon.
That was not directed by David Gordon
Was it
Green. That
not?
was directed by Seth Rogen and Evan Gold.
He was a producer on it then. He was definitely part of it.
Possibly. David Gordon Green. David Gordon Green. In fact, I don't know if David Gordon Green did do Your Highness. He definitely did Pineapple Express.
No, he
definitely did
definitely
Pineapple
did Your
Express.
Highness.
But he
100%.
also did that movie with Paul Rudd. I can't think of what it's called. But he's more kind of known for kind of like indie comedy stuff.
He has to
like,
go. He did
Your Highness
Joe
would be more
with
the
Nick
kind of
Cage.
silly kind of side of things.
Joe with Nick Cage was a kind of
Yes.
interesting one. It was a bit slow for me, but you see that one where he was kind of an alcoholic, kind of traumatized guy, and basically kind of surrogate father to this kid who he's working with. And the guy has chops on that. And I haven't seen George Washington. Apparently, is a very good film as well.
What's that?
George Washington. It's called. I think.
I haven't heard of that.
Okay, it's a lower class community, and something happens kind of heavy. But apparently, that was what because like for me, when you hear it, of course, everyone's saying Your Highness, and I just want to mash my head off a wall. But apparently, the guy does have.
Yeah,
the
I
intentions
definitely
of
have
this,
a good.
And they have said they're going to make a very scary film, which gives me confidence. Because initially, I was thinking they're going to go like the Halloween Resurrection type way and try and bring in a bit of let's have a bit of fun with this. And like whatever about Friday the 13th, that's kind of okay with. But Halloween is not meant to be. So. Look,
when you say a sequel, what
apparently it's supposed to
yeah.
pick up after the second Halloween.
So it's after 1 and 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
This
so
is
set in periods.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But doesn't have to follow the canon of the later ones. Now, this is a weird one for me because it's the same way I felt with Neil Blomkamp's Alien one, which looks like it's probably not going to happen now. But like, I am excited by the idea of kind of retconning a bit and going back, but at the same time, it's kind of cheating. I don't know, like, because then you're creating like two separate timelines. I know what you mean. Like, and it's just because it's a really cool idea to be able to jump in. Like in comics and stuff, you can kind of reinvent these things, no problem.
Yeah.
Or even in games, but like in a film, you're like,
there's like I always kind of take these like reboot and remake news with like a pinch of salt, because you never know how it's going to go. Like chances are things usually just they don't work out like half as good as like the original stuff, but maybe there's a chance they've got like a really good angle on it, that would justify it being set after the second one.
I'd say it's more because they just don't want to get into any of the what's the little kid's name, which I quite liked her storyline. Danielle Harris played her in 4 and 5.
The fourth one where she became
but like and then the cult of Michael and stuff like that, Cult of the Thorn. But like, see, it makes sense to have it there. And like in the same way that Friday the 13th, I wouldn't mind. Like, I'm not expecting them to make a film better than the original. I think that's probably a very unfair expectation. If they gave me just a decent, good slasher with what I felt was true to Michael Myers as a character, I'm fairly okay with it. Like, I'm a guy who watches Halloween Resurrection. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not gonna like not see these things. And I guess the good reaction.
Halloween Resurrection was actually like the final insult, though, wasn't it? Like,
that would be a good title.
That was the subtitle, the final insult. Like we talked about that before on the podcast. We had a good rant.
You're right,
about
and
that.
you're right. Like it did basically kill the franchise. So it's not like these guys can anymore. And like I'm glad it's not another reboot. I think that is good progress. I guess. I don't apologize for my knee-jerk reaction against the director just because he's unproven in it. And either you kind of go, there's always the fear with comedy people. But then again, like The Big Short is directed by Adam McKay, who did like Anchorman and stuff.
Absolutely.
And like it's a wonderful.
Like film. I think I do have respect for David Gordon Green as a director. I think he's got his own kind of unique voice, like that comes out in a lot of his stuff. Less so in Your Highness, if that was his. I'm surprised to hear that was him. You know what I mean?
It is him.
But. Like even Eastbound and Down, like they did that show together, like and that was a real kind of like irreverent kind of like drama comedy kind of thing, so it doesn't necessarily mean I'm confident that he's gonna do a great job on Halloween, but I'm interested.
Well, I think the fact that Carpenter is on board and is happy with this choice, so obviously they have had a pitch, and that's not to say the Carpenter's always had the best judgment. Later,
we've all seen The Ward.
See, that's what I'm going to say, because like I'm a massive Carpenter fan, but like if you're going to be an honest person, you've got to say serious drop off towards the end, The Ward being particular, But I don't know that Carpenter has much reverence for the Halloween franchise particularly, you know what I mean, because he did kind of leave it after 3 and he didn't want to do any more Myers ones at that stage. So it's hard to know on that kind of level, but yeah, you would hope. And in Blumhouse, despite that some of their films can be
is it under Blumhouse?
Yeah, it is. So, but I trust them to want to try and establish a better one, much more than I would trust Platinum Dunes, who like ruined Nightmare on Elm Street, and I didn't like the Friday the 13th reboot, though I know some people do.
Yeah, I didn't like any of them.
But like, so yeah, look, you've got Carpenter, who apparently is on board with it. You have Blumhouse like shepherding it along, and so relatively safe hands. They know what they're doing. Yeah, hopefully. Do you know the weirdest thing for me with the, and again, because I'm a huge Halloween fan, the hardest thing they seem to find in all these films is just to get the fucking mask right. The films, like when you watch it, it's so uneven, because obviously the first
is when you look
like,
at a film, even in the
I like the Rob Zombie mask, actually. I thought they did that good, but like from 4 onwards, sometimes it's the most bizarre looking rubber mask.
Even in like Rogue One, the new Darth Vader.
They fucked it
You're like,
up.
what's going on? You're just something in your brain.
The helmet
wrong
stuck
there.
out though.
What's
It's
wrong
supposed to
there?
be tucked in. They really, I don't know what they were doing with that, but my issues with Rogue One are for another podcast.
On a different
but
channel.
yeah, so okay, like we're kind of we're open minded and hopeful.
What do you think, Connor?
Well, yeah, wait and see. I mean, just to know.
Okay, man. Here's because like I saw, I don't know, maybe it was Bloody Disgusting or someone was having the chat about the Friday the 13th one getting cancelled. And Halloween is part of this conversation. Maybe should they just be left alone as well? Like, I don't mind seeing another one because I'm always excited by the idea, but it wouldn't really upset me if someone told me we're just putting a cap on that and that's the end of that.
We've got enough Friday the 13th.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like
there's some movies like, I mean, even like I think I was saying about some of the maybe some of the werewolf movies or even some of the Hammer movies, that maybe they're due a bit of an update or a reboot, like they could get a new audience in because they haven't been kind of done to death.
The Nanny would be great for a remake.
What is tricky though about the difference with that I'd see with remaking, like Dracula will probably be alternately remade for the reason that I'd say that to me there's no definitive Dracula.
Yes.
You're right.
Whereas it's weird when you do the opposite way. The definitive Halloween is made.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you're making it, you're kind of, it's sort of like Dracula still, everyone can take a shot at it. You feel like, hey, I could still make the best Dracula.
Yes.
There's no definitive.
Or the Dracula for this generation, even like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas there's something harder about making the thing when you already know it's going to be worse. There's
It
no
is.
way to make it better.
Plus, because Halloween 2 did an incredible job for me following up the first one. Firstly, the fact that it starts instantly after the first one.
I love when sequels do that.
Yeah, but it has its fairly good scares and tension bits in as well. Like, it's not as good as the first one, but it's still very much in that kind of world. Slasher films are really hard because, like you said, Connor, if you've nailed it the first time, there's not a lot of places to go because the more you explore the character, the less creepy he is.
Yeah.
And like, I think
how many ways can you skin a cat?
But that's it. Like Friday the 13th
I mean?
somehow, and I would actually think it deserves kudos for how many films it managed to string out of that concept. And you find it funny though, since they managed to churn out nearly one a year for like a decade, and now it's like,
and especially since the fourth one was called The Final Chapter.
they're struggling to be able to make another one. You're kind of going like, these guys without the most talented writers and directors on earth managed to churn one out every 2 years, and like they were entertaining enough in their own way. So do we either need to go back to like a Friday the 13th where let's just fucking accept it is going to be Camp Blood reopening, 10 new teenagers, some kind of bit of fun kills, we'll have a crazy Ralph who says you're doomed. Like, do we want that, or do we want someone to try and deliver us a terrifying new Friday the 13th?
I want a new film. I want a new genre, like, a new subgenre, a new film.
But do you want it then in the way? Because like I
don't want
personally
the new
don't have a
Friday.
problem
Did
with
the
Rob
Bye Bye
Zombie.
Man not
But we're going to talk about that in 2
I haven't
fucking
seen that.
seconds.
I haven't seen that.
I'm going to
But
start spitting at a microphone.
I want someone, maybe someone sitting at this very table, or someone listening, or whoever, to come up with the new Friday the 13th.
Yeah, our new
for
Freddy
this
Krueger,
generation.
our new Jason.
Yes.
Yeah, but not going back to the other.
And to come back to Star Wars, when I was in the cinema watching Rogue One, I couldn't get over the thought of how they're just trying to replicate something that happened like 30 years ago. They're and as a result,
It felt
they're
like a
not
fan film to me.
creating.
It felt like high budgeted fan film.
Absolutely, but as a result, they're not creating what will in the future be the Star Wars of our generation. You know what I mean?
think that's the thing. I think you're right there in the sense that when Halloween hit, it was partly because it was like you were saying, horror came home to the suburbs.
Yeah.
And so it had a new evolution. It was a new thing at that time. So doing it now or remaking it now, like no matter how good the film is, it's the wrong time.
Yeah.
Or it's just the wrong take on it. See, I wonder, like, say, the much derided Rob Zombie's Halloween, but I think that it's more interesting than a lot of the remakes out there. Like, whether it works or not, that's a different story. But like, I wonder if that wasn't a guy wearing a Michael Myers mask, would people ever see? I don't think it would have made as much money because, of course, they're trading off the Halloween name. But I wonder would people have been able to accept it, and would it be, like, because like you said, we need new characters, but the genre doesn't necessarily need to be reinvented. Like Poltergeist didn't reinvent ghost stories. It was just a great one on its own right. So like, I think maybe it is. We need a guy in a mask. Like this is what we love, our Freddy Krueger or whatever it is. But we need something. But then the danger is, and that's why like we scooch onto the Bye Bye Man, because I don't know how many of you have seen it, but like that's a film that I think was written, produced, and created with the attempt to try and make a new franchise, not to try and make a great horror film.
Right. Okay.
Everyone is trying to manufacture franchises now. It's like trying to make a viral video for the internet instead of just making a good video that goes viral.
You know what I think is interesting though about the horror remakes as well is like one of the reasons why Marvel movies, for example, you'll always get people going to the cinema to see them, because even if everything on the internet before the film comes out is saying do not go see the new Spider-Man movie, it's terrible, look at the costume, I don't like it, blah blah blah, whatever it is, or if it's DC, people are talking
Suicide
about
Squad,
Batman,
780 million,
everyone will go to see it. All of the fanboys will go to see it just so they can hate on it even more, right? But with horror movies, these remakes, they fall through the cracks so easily if they're not good. Like, I mean, like that Poltergeist movie, when I heard they were remaking Poltergeist, I was genuinely like outraged, like, so to the point that I was just like, I'm never going to watch that movie. You know what I mean?
I was comforted when they saw Sam Rockwell was going to be in it, because you're kind of going, maybe they're taking it kind of seriously.
But then
anyway,
I just started going, fuck you, Sam Rockwell. Like
I started watching it, I couldn't get past 10 minutes.
You can't, and that's the weird thing. You're kind of wondering, how is this so painfully bland? Because you're kind of going, the premise and everything, like, I know this works. I've seen a version of it that worked great. And like, you should at least be able to get halfway through before you get fucked off. But like, it's just...
But that's the thing, I think that the horror fans are just less likely to even just give it the time of day. You know what I mean? To go to the cinema.
True,
and
but even as a film watchable, like, I don't know. I guess again because the Hollywood studio seems to be trying to force them into their own kind of little kind of cookie cutter kind of formula. But like, I think maybe it's just people aren't given their own kind of freedom, and it's just so by committee. But there's no reason why Poltergeist, like, it would be an inferior remake. But there's no reason why it's so bad.
Yeah.
Or the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, or Friday the 13th, or in fairness to Friday the 13th, and I'm not a big fan of it, it sticks relatively close to the rules. He just kind of umps the violence and Jason moves a bit quicker. I can get over that. At least it's kind of honourable to it. But these other ones, how do they mess up so much?
But the thing is, it's that intangible thing of the actual magic of the original, like the way, Connor, you were saying about like Halloween being this like new thing, this new evolution of it that was like captured on screen. So when someone tries to make it, it's like a photograph of a photograph, like, and the more you take that, or a photocopy of a photocopy, and the more you photocopy it, the more faded it gets, and the shittier the quality of the pages, right. So like when they were making Halloween in the 70s with John Carpenter, and they were all like, giving it their darndest, and like,
and again, a guy not setting out to change the
Curtis,
genre, just trying to make a good film.
Exactly, but they were trying to even just prove themselves as filmmakers in a very unique and special way. That's what was captured on screen, and that's what people saw, and it connected with people. And then, it's just someone going, okay, right, so in the first 5 minutes we see the guy and he has the mask, and that's the girl, and they're just copying that and just like painting by numbers, you know what I mean? So like, I think lose the magic so quickly.
And I suppose like this Halloween is obviously gonna like must tie into Laurie Strode in some way if they're carrying it on after the first two. But I almost kind of feel what we need is, it's just like, say, even if it's Haddonfield 40 years later or whatever like that, it's just different people in the town, and Michael Myers comes home. Like, just let there be a totally different dramatic storyline what's going on, because I don't think it's the repetition of Michael Myers is the problem. It's the trying to, like you said, sort of tie all these things in together. Like, he can exist in any kind of a situation in the same way that Jason existed in space. But I think, because if you have a different, because like for me, and this is copyright, so if anyone steals it off me, like if I was going to do a Halloween one like that, the way I always thought it would be most interesting would be like, I love
how you think by saying it's copyrighted, it's copyrighted.
I have copied and pasted it on Facebook, and I have shared it with my friends, and so that's the law, okay?
Does that not mean Facebook on it now?
No! But no, see, because like for me, it's the dramatic context that's the problem with them. So like, I would go with it where it has to be a survivor from the previous Halloween films, someone who witnessed some of the brutality, wasn't even, and is still traumatized by it. And it's the whole like, trying to recover from those kind of things. I suppose H2O touches on that a bit with Laurie Strode and her stress with it. But, I'd love that idea. Or something like going into the supposed supernatural powers of Michael Myers, whether he is or isn't. Thank God Ali's not here. She's somewhere in Berlin. She's shouting. But because there's the thought in Halloween 6 about the cult of Michael Myers and the kind of worshipping of him. But I love that idea of someone actually trying to track down Michael Myers to try and actually either study him or take a sample of blood off him because they think they could actually use it to cure problems diseases or anything like that. So you've got this whole idea of a very evil force that could potentially do good. And so you'd be deliberately luring Michael Myers into your world as opposed to him just turning up randomly. Yeah. You are actually pulling this evil into your life, with the interest of trying to create something good.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're
if only Peter Cushing was still
no, you mean Tom Pleasance.
We've seen so many movies where the big scary bad guy shows up and kills a bunch of people. What if in a Michael Myers film where Michael Myers isn't setting out to kill people and it's everyone trying to kill this Michael Myers character,
the opening of Jason Goes to Hell,
like a manhunt, to kill him, and it's like if it was somehow from his perspective or something like that.
It's something just a little bit different with it, because I still think the character is iconic. I don't think there's a problem that way, but it's just because Michael Myers is like the shark from Jaws. He's a killing machine, and if anyone who puts themselves in front of it, he'll kill them. But there's no implication of Jaws 4 where Michael Myers will just track people down to all these different towns. He goes after his family members, but he doesn't seem to have an obsession with Haddonfield and just murdering people. You know what I mean? I just think
what about Michael Myers on a plane? A transatlantic flight. Michael Myers.
I haven't seen Rings yet, but it's that whole, the trailer is, hey look, it's like Ring, but it's the TV's on a plane, and you're like, oh god.
God.
I watched last night, and this is the first film
Rings?
that creeped me. No. Sorry, this is. I mean, I'm totally going on to a slightly different topic now, but
good. We were getting carried
away. It's kind of, I suppose you could say, did anyone watch Making a Murderer and those kind of Jinx and those? So there's a new one called Shadow of Truth.
Okay.
Oh, is this the Israeli one?
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet. I have it on my Netflix list. Netflix.
There's 4 episodes. I started watching. I watched them all last night, and I have to say, I went to bed a bit creeped out.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it in English or is it?
It's subtitled.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's definitely worth
a
a watch.
documentary like Making a Murder style.
Yeah. It's about a young girl. I think she was 12, 13. She was murdered in a school. It's basically about, like they all are, the murder investigation, and they all have the intro credit sequence inspired by. What was that thing? Matthew McConaughey was originally
True Crime.
True Detective.
Or True Detective.
It's like every credit sequence.
Yes,
Looks like True Detective now. But it's great because it's one of those ones, when you think, it's definitely that guy.
Right.
It's definitely this guy. But it goes creepy. It goes into weird territory.
And this is real documentary as well.
Yeah,
so,
real.
I'm very
Speaking of
curious
Aleister Crowley.
I just looked over my shoulder there.
No, that's a good spot for that, actually. I think, because I only saw The Jinx for the first time this Christmas. I was a little underwhelmed because I really loved Making a Murderer. It's an interesting story, and obviously the revelations are good in it. But they kind of fuck around with narrative structure to try and make their episodes more interesting. That kind of bugged me, as in Making a Murderer goes through it sequentially.
Yeah.
While The Jinx deliberately holds information from certain times to only introduce later episodes for dramatic effect, and that kind of slightly bugged me because.
But even with Making a Murder, I kind of found that you would watch because some of those episodes, what were they, an hour long, or some of them were longer than an hour.
I never got bored with Making a Murder.
I found as much as I really enjoyed it, I found somewhere around the middle there was this kind of really drawn out parts, and there'd be nothing happening in an episode for 45 minutes. It'd just be kind of back and forth, blah blah blah, and then in the last couple of minutes they'd be like, "But what about this piece of information?" And you'd be like, "Oh my god, I have to watch the next one." And you turn on the next one, they're like, "Yeah, turned out this piece of information actually wasn't that important."
There's a lot of
and it would be
modern
another
shows
45 minutes
that,
of dragging. I find Netflix are guilty with a lot of that kind of stuff. They kind of design stuff.
Can we even in two minutes discuss the OA and how much I want to cancel Netflix's existence on the planet of the Earth?
You want to cancel Netflix?
Netflix, that's it.
You want to take it down?
Done.
Yeah.
I love Netflix, and yet no, that is 6 hours of my life I will never get back.
Is it okay? I haven't seen it, but is it someone wrote a script for a feature film, and then they brought it to Netflix, and Netflix were like, "Okay, you have a 2-hour film here. Let's make it 6 hours."
That's it. Because I don't want to get stuck on, but so Britt Marling, she's the one who did Another Earth. Did you see that? It was a good film. A very interesting kind of film if you see it. But so basically, no, it's a series, so it is 6. But yeah, it is stretched beyond And even at the end, like, there's no proper resolution. You'll slap your head so hard at the final moment that they seem to, when someone thinks that they've built up to this moving moment, and you're kind of going, oh my God. And it's almost worth watching just to be so appalled.
Just to be so let
almost
down
like watching
and
8
enraged.
seasons of Dexter just to see the final scene of it. But like,
what's the general vibe on the OA? Because I have heard people talking about it.
A nice concept. Basically your OA is the main character. That's the name she's given herself now. I can't remember what her real name was. She turns up out of the blue. She's been missing for years.
Okay.
Supposed to be dead, or could have been kidnapped. When she was kidnapped, she was blind. She turns up. She's walking across the motorway and she jumps off a bridge trying to kill herself.
Okay.
But somehow survives, and now she can see. And so she's going home. And she starts recounting the tale of where she's been and what happened to her. But like, my God, it is all just flashbacks. And again, she just doesn't mention things, and people just start following her. And it involves magical powers with contemporary dance, which is the most ridiculous fucking thing. No,
I'm interested.
No, you think that, but when you see actors going, it's so, you're kind of going, this is better going somewhere. And then the final thing, I find it insulting to the topic that they use it to go on. And the new series coming soon. It's one of those ones where you see people online. It was like Hemlock Grove, where on IMDb it's either 10 out of 10 or 1 out of 10. Because the 10 out of 10 is like, but it's different, man, and that makes it brilliant. And it's really deep and philosophical. There is more philosophy on my bumhole. I seriously,
I've seen his bumhole. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's a weird shape, isn't it? It's kind of moonlight crescent. But no, it's incredibly frustrating. But yeah, with the structure wise, is it 6 episodes or not? It's so odd because like the first episode's an hour and a half. Most of your episodes are 40 and 50 minutes. The 5th episode or 4th episode is only 33 minutes. That's weird. They literally just didn't have any story. I don't know how or what happened with it, but it's
why make it 6 episodes then? You know what I mean? Like, why not just make 4?
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I have no idea, but it's really one of those things for people who think they're really intelligent and they think like, oh yeah, I get philosophy, and anyone who has any ability to think deeply would just dismiss this as childish nonsense.
Well, you heard it here folks. If you like the OA, then you are full of shit.
So is there any, we're nearly hitting 2 hours, so we might just last a few minutes.
The Bye Bye Man, Connor, have you seen it?
No.
Have you seen it?
No.
Okay, very, very quickly on that one as well. Utter pile of shite.
What's it about?
Very, very disappointing.
Don't like the name.
No, me neither. Okay, so yeah, they buy a new house, seems to be haunted. There's a door that keeps opening, and the Bye Bye Man's come into their life. If you say his name or you think his name, the Bye Bye Man will get you. Simple premise, fine.
Okay.
The Bye Bye Man looks kind of creepy, but very generic. Has this CGI dog creature that travels with him that attacks people randomly for no reason. Film doesn't make a lick of sense. Very disappointing. Very annoying. If you read up on the original story it's based on, it's much creepier because that CGI dog was actually meant to be made up of the flesh of all the Bye Bye Man's victims. That he sewed them all together to create this kind of hellhound, which is kind of a mess of idea. Yeah. Never mentions it. It's just completely to be avoided. And then Split. Has anyone seen?
Oh no, but I was
saw
going to go see it.
Yeah, well, okay, we're not. So like, there's obviously talk of revelations towards the end, which actually are separate from the film. Like the film is its own film, so it's not like an M. Night thing that you know involves a total twist. So there's a thing that happens at the very end, and we can talk about that on another day. Some people have seen it. Yeah, and for some people they love it, and other people don't. It's not the worst film. I think it's M. Night on similar form to The Visit, which I wasn't overly in love with. But James McAvoy doing good. It's kind of like a sort of a Twilight Zone sort of a story stretched out. I think the women are horribly objectified, which I don't like. There's like for no reason at all, just because one of the characters OCD, a girl gets dust in her clothes, and so one girl has to take off her top and the other one has to take off her skirt to dress the other one.
Yeah, that was
creepy.
That was the thing that I thought.
If it was a 20-year-old making that, I get it. M. Night's a grown man.
Yeah, for M. Night, I was really disappointed in that kind of thing as well. And like, I mean, me and my girlfriend were going to go see it. I ended up going to see it by myself, and then I ended up saying to my girlfriend, I was like, don't go see it because it's all like, it's seriously like violent towards women and like some just dodgy kind of creepy sexy stuff
and stuff like that.
That's unnecessary. It's just you could do the film.
With the story. The film is not about sex.
Yeah, I was really surprised with M. Night for that because none of his films are like that. There's not a lick of anything like that in his films.
Lazy,
very very cheap, like I probably sound like a big old man like talking about it or something, but like I mean it just didn't fit with that movie.
Massively successful though, #1 in America 3 weeks in a row.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Huge money.
Definitely not.
Which
Definitely
I'm
not one of
shocked
my-
at. The same with Don't Breathe. You're kind of thinking these are not mainstream films. I don't know what's going on with the public at the moment, but they're going for them. But Connor, see it so we can have a brief talk about the end.
No, I definitely want
because it's
to.
not worth ruining on other people.
Of course.
And I think because if we're under time pressure, we should say. But I do want to talk about Under the Shadow next time.
Oh,
Because
yeah. No, that's
really good. But that
great.
needs a bit of time to have a conversation about. So
And I need to see it.
yeah,
so,
do watch
Okay.
it. It's on Netflix for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, you'll find it there. Really worth watching. I might even want to watch it again before we have it.
I'd
We
watch
should have
it
a
again.
proper
Yeah,
chat about
yeah.
it.
Okay.
For me, one of the best horror films in recent
Definitely.
years. If you love horror films, you haven't seen it, watch it.
I watched that on my own, right?
Properly
It was
creepy and spooky.
totally.
Yeah.
It was the first film in ages that I actually, for a moment, said maybe I'll switch this off.
Yeah,
for a
no,
little bit.
it was like for me way better than the Babadook or anything. Like that is it's so definitely viewers watch it. We'll talk about it next week along with whatever else we do. And if there's anything else you think we should be talking about, mention it on the Facebook page, which we
please.
now have set up.
Yeah.
Or any other suggestions of topics you'd like us to discuss, or any opinions you want to give us about what we talked about today. Apart from the OA, because I'm right about that one, but other ones we're open-minded to.
Cool.
Is that it?
Okay, yeah, that's it.
Great
Thanks
stuff,
for listening,
yeah.
guys.
Thanks to Film and Base for having us host our podcast here. And
Yeah, especially Steve Galvin. Who's
Good man, Steve.
excellent. And we'll hopefully have Ali back with us on our next episode.
Don't look at the eyes, Rex.